Welcome into the Robert Allen and Friends Show here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Again, no Robert today. It is Patrick Wheeler back with everybody for one more day. So Robert wraps up his vacation today. Hanging out with you guys for a little bit longer here. And listen, we have a ton to get to. I'm hoping I can get to everything here in 3 hours. It's that much. The weekend sports news was going crazy. Leave it to the Pac-12 to do a classic Friday night news dump on deciding not to have only to have conference games this season. Not a surprise. I said a bunch on Friday that that would happen probably that day. I was hoping that it would happen sometime in the afternoon, so the guys on the afternoon sports drive, Jason and Carson and Trey, would have a chance to talk about it. But as I said, leave it to the Pac-12 to dump it off later in the night so that people could sit on it on the weekend, media could sit on it on the weekend. The ACC's next. I would not be surprised at all. I'm saying the ACC is probably next, and then the SEC and the Big 12 really are the ones that, I'm not completely sold on doing what the Pac-12 and the Big 10 is doing. We're going to dive into that because, yes, there were also some comments made by SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey this weekend that, they raised a few eyebrows. I mean, that's probably the best way to put it. And but I'll tell you what, we're going to dive into it. I can tell you, if you listen to me in the past, 3 days now, you're not going to get doom and gloom here on this show. You're going to get reading from what is said, but also usually I'm getting pretty optimistic about this stuff, and rightfully so, I think, when it comes to football happening this fall. Before we get into all that, don't forget that Crazy Days is happening now at the End Zone. It's the biggest Crazy Days ever. Today through Thursday, you get 50% off store-wide. And Friday through Sunday, you get their sidewalk sale 70% off. That's today, or 9 to 8, I should say, is the hours, Monday through Thursday. Friday through Sunday, you got Friday 9 to 8, Saturday 9 to 7, Sunday 9 to 6. So plenty of time. A ton of new Nike stuff coming in as well. I think Robert's supposed to be there sometime this week, one of those days. So he'll be actually there at the End Zone. So make sure you take advantage of Crazy Days. 50% off, and then during the weekend on the sidewalk sale, 70% off. It's about as good a deal as you're going to find anywhere on all of that gear. Anything you could probably want, you're going to find it at the End Zone there. So be sure to check that out at some point here today. As I said, a ton to get to. Oklahoma State with some news, and we'll get into that here. College football news. Over the weekend, there was just a ton of stuff coming out with the NBA. The Washington Redskins are no longer the Washington Redskins. We'll talk about that. We've got tons of stuff to get to. Levi Peckinpah's coming on with me in the 12 o'clock hour. We'll have plenty to talk about with him. And again, I'm going to open up the text line. You can send text messages to me today. Anything you want to talk about, let me know. I'll try to get it answered. That is 417-489-0790. You can check that out. Send me a text message. I know we had a lot of fun with that on Friday. Do it again. Tell me what you want to talk about. We'll get to it. Phone lines are also open, 533-1020, 533-1051. So first of all, for Oklahoma State, news, was it yesterday, a couple days ago now, that Kelvin Banks has decommitted from Oklahoma State. Part of that 2022 class. He's a 4-star offensive tackle out of Humble, Texas. He committed last September, and here's the thing. People are going to immediately think, does this have something to do with what happened with Oklahoma State and so recently with football? With Gundy, with Chuba, all that. Look, my response immediately to that is I seriously doubt it. I don't think it had anything to do with it. I think it simply was a case of he had better offers roll in. Let's be honest. Auburn, Baylor, LSU, Oregon, Texas A&M, and USC have been recent offers for this guy. Okay, he hears a name like Auburn. He hears a name like LSU, Oregon. He has a chance to play in the SEC. Look, I'm sorry, he's going to take it. I think this was simply an early commit, a too early commit for a guy who jumped on the first Power 5 school to offer him. That happens sometimes. We see it. Imagine being a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, and Oklahoma State comes at you and says, look, we want you to play football at Oklahoma State. Well, yeah. Big party's like, I gotta do that right now. Well, then, a year later or so, here come a couple SEC schools. Oh, by the way, one of them that won the championship last year says, hey, we want you. You think his mind might change a little bit? Yeah. So before everybody gets all hot and bothered by the fact that maybe had something to do with everything that went on this offseason, there's going to be, that's going to happen. People are going to jump into it and say, look, it's already happening. Recruiting's being affected. Oh my gosh. No. This is simply a case of a guy that committed too early. Bigger, better football schools offered him. And he's going to take the chance to go play at one of those schools. Would I be surprised to see him at Auburn or LSU? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But there will be plenty of people that immediately assume that this, and again, he came out and said on Twitter, look, I just want to do what's best for me and my family. Never said anything either way, whether it had to do with what happened the past couple of weeks or not. But I'm telling you, based off the schools that were offering Kelvin Banks recently, that dude sees a brighter future at a bigger, better football team. Sorry, he just does. Only one left in the 2022 class so far is DeKelvian Beeman. He's a safety. He's that lone commit there in the 2022 class. So, yeah, it's a big hit. I mean, a 4-star lineman, that's not someone that's easy to replace all the time. But if you've heard this show before, as Robert says, and as many people around here say, stars don't matter. You can get a solid offensive tackle at a lot of other places. I think that's fair. He was the number 13 overall offensive tackle, number 21 overall recruit in Texas, according to 247. So, yeah, I mean, solid player. Not like this isn't a hit or anything. Now I can just brush it off. But I do want to make sure to get that out there that this was just a guy that had a chance at something that was, in his mind, bigger and better. Put yourself in that situation. The LSU came knocking at the door, where would you go? Even if they didn't guarantee you a ton of playing time at first, where would you go? I mean, really, come on. So we'll get that out there first. As I said, the Pac-12, well, they decided to follow suit with the Big Ten. The Big Ten becomes the first Power 5 to come out and say we're doing conference only. Pac-12 immediately follows. Kind of surprised the Pac-12 wasn't first, to be honest. Big Ten led the way. Pac-12 is deciding to piggyback. And here's the thing, is that Larry Scott, commissioner, comes out and says that statement, hey, you know what, we put the health of our students first, and we're going off science and data. I'm like, dude, what data are you looking at, man? What data are you looking at? I mean, if anything, shouldn't we say that certain non-conference games shouldn't happen instead of all non-conference games? Because when you look at and that's the thing, you look at the distance at some of these games. Okay, we're getting travel cited as one of the main reasons we can't play these games. Don't want any more exposure to the virus. But you're telling me that in the Big Ten, for instance, Rutgers can come in 500 plus miles away to Ohio State and play a game in the conference. But Ohio State can't have Bowling Green come in 200 miles away? I mean, I'm missing the sensical info here, apparently. I'm missing what data is being reflected. And I've heard this argument made before, which is so true. This is so true. Student athletes are safer on campus than they are anywhere else. They're safer amongst a football team than they are anywhere else. What's the first thing that we see when the Big Ten and the Pac-12 comes out? We see the health of our student athletes is our main concern. Okay. Well, their health is in the best care possible on these campuses. Medical professionals all over the place. Many universities with hospitals attached. None of these student athletes are in the hospital with this virus. They are mostly asymptomatic. When I said the other day that the Big Ten jumped the gun, I really meant it. I think the Pac-12 did too. The idea of canceling all non-conference games instead of the selecting which ones made the most sense, which not a lot of them make a lot of sense, okay? If anything, couldn't you add some non-conference games within the state if you wanted less travel? So cut down on the games that you think are too far away. For instance, the Pac-12, you don't want Oregon State to come into Stillwater along over 2,000 miles away, fine. But why cancel that instead of trying to find someone closer that would be willing to play? Because I think that would be possible, right? I think it would. So Oklahoma State now sitting officially without a week 1 opponent. Their statement basically saying, hey, we're going to check out every option possible, and we're going to be in touch with season ticket holders in the next few days. They got to find an opponent for this first week. If it means going in and finding an SEC opponent, fine. I saw this point made over the weekend too, and I think I even said it at one point because it makes a lot of sense. If we were being completely honest, would anyone really have an issue with just the SEC and the Big 12 playing football this year? I doubt it. You get some select fans around the Big 10 area, your occasional Pac-12 fan, the ACC on the coasts. But let's be honest, as a whole, would anyone really have a huge issue with just the SEC and the Big 12 playing? Have the SEC Big 12 showdown this entire year? Would anyone really be that upset? No, I wouldn't. 2 best conferences going head-to-head? Come on. I would draw plenty of viewers. People would watch every single game. And guess what? You wouldn't have to turn on ESPN and go to some nonsense Big 10 Conference USA game or whatever the heck. Some uninteresting game. And you wouldn't have to go to some low life, some down low, boring ACC game. Why not watch an entertaining SEC Big 12 matchup time and time again? That sounds like a decent season. Now, here's the thing. I have these issues because when I look at the data, it tells me that student athletes have almost a 0% chance of dying from this virus. Okay? Now, they can get it. We all know it. But even being affected by it is a very, very low number for student athletes. So, to me, jumping the gun is something that has become so normal for many people, especially those in power and administrators. People in power across the universities, across the nation. We got to make sure we get this out there now. Here on July 13th, it has to be done now. Well, now all of a sudden, Bob Bowlesby's the only one that's saying, look, we're not going to jump the gun. We have a little bit of time left here. We're still going to decide. I say that now because of what Greg Sankey said over the weekend, SEC commissioner. He had some comments that, well, a lot of people basically were like, here we go. Here we go. SEC's on the chopping block. I'll tell you what he said and whether or not I'm concerned about the SEC. That's next on the Robert Allen and Friends show here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Welcome back, Robert Allen and Friends show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler filling in for Robert. Had a great time filling in for Robert these past few days. Got to talk a ton about it. And that's the thing is I think when Robert comes back, there's a lot he's going to catch up on and talk about, including all this mess with here we go in the Big 10 and the Pac-12, and will the Big 12 be next someday, and will the SEC be next, apparently. I say that because Greg Sankey came out this weekend, and his comments were not just about a non-conference schedule, anything like that. They were about a football season in general. And he said his worry was high to very high about not having a season. And like my first response is, okay, why the need for those comments now? When the Big 10 and the Pac-12 that have already absurdly jumped the gun haven't even said they're thinking about canceling the whole season yet. Greg Sankey's got to come out and be like, yeah, we might not be able to do it. Okay. Okay, bad PR move there, buddy. And I just don't get it. Because at this time, Greg Sankey, top of the food chain in college football in the SEC, has a chance to say, at that point in time, okay, when he was asked that question, the best response would have been, not just for PR, but logically, would have been, we're still weighing all options. We're not sure either way, but we are planning right now to still go in and have a college football season. Not, yeah, I'm pretty worried, very worried. That did nothing but stir the pot even more. Now, all of a sudden, in my eyes, Bob Bowlesby looks like the smartest man on the planet, college football. He's basically the only one that has not come out and jumped the gun at this point from the Big 12. He even said, look, we're thinking that the Big 10, for instance, they kind of did a little premature action there. We're still looking at all the options. He says, as of now, we're not planning on canceling a non-conference part of our schedule. And why? Because that's the right way to go about it. I mean, Greg Sankey had a chance there to really make a solid statement, but instead, he gives reporters more to write about, more to be afraid about. And I said this since the beginning. I'll say it up until I finally see it happen. The SEC is going to play football. The SEC is going to play football. Big 12 is going to play football. Not only from a profit standpoint, how much money they stand to make, but also to stand up to every other conference with the absurd leadership that's going on in the Big 10 and the Pac-12 and the ACC. Stand up and say, look, we're figuring out how to live with this thing, and that includes playing a football season. I mean, it just does. I hope they do that. They have the shot to do it. They have the opportunity to do it. And again, I would love to bring up the questions I asked earlier to Larry Scott, for instance, in the Pac-12, or to the commissioner of the Big Ten. Look, why can some games be played but some can't? Why can some games be played that are longer travel and some can't that are shorter travel? What makes sense there? I mean, honestly, that's where I'm at right now. Trying to figure out the rationale to these decisions is mind-numbing. And the jumping to conclusions right now is mind-numbing. So the big question around here now is, what does Oklahoma State do in week 1? Who do they go after? Can they get somebody? People still looking at that Alabama game. Oh my goodness, USC's not going to play Alabama in week 1. Alabama needs an opponent. Oklahoma State needs an opponent. Ooh. We ask Levi when he gets here what the heck he thinks about that. I said that earlier on. I don't think it would happen, but there's good and bad if it does. There's good and bad if it does. The good, again, is that Oklahoma State jumps out to a week 1 opponent like Alabama, beats them, and all of a sudden the talk is, wow, Mike Gundy and his team, they have it going. Forget what happened this offseason. It's all turned around. Look at that. That's the good. Regardless of how the team plays, if they come away with a victory, that's the good. The bad is, we scheduled one of the toughest opponents in college football, week 1, lose, and now it's going to be tough to get in to the college football playoff. We better hope we win out and win the Big 12. So you're kind of balancing out in both hands. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? I think Alabama's doing the same thing. If they were asked the same thing, they would say, well, we look at Oklahoma State, they're not anyone to just shake your head at. No, this isn't your average opponent here. This is not who we would have faced in USC. This is Oklahoma State. And look who they've got on their team. Best running back in the nation. Oh, yeah, said it. One of the best receivers in the nation. A rising quarterback. We don't even know what our quarterback situation is here in Alabama. Tell you what, the Crimson Tide is relying a ton on that defense this year. They do every year, but maybe more so than in a long time. The question's still on the offensive side of the ball. Telling you, this could be it. This could be a shot. Still think it's unlikely, but it could happen. So the ACC is going to be next, as I said. They had already talked about, well, our discussion is coming in the coming weeks. Yeah, it's coming. It really is. And regarding the Greg Sankey comments with the SEC, I honestly wouldn't be too worried. I really wouldn't be too worried. Too big of a conference, as we talked about. Too much money flows through to be worried. Let's see. Another cancellation update I just got. The Patriot League to cancel all fall sports. All options, including the spring football season, are still on the table for when the conference would resume sports competition. They're not going to play a spring schedule. I don't know how many times I've had to say that. And why that still seems like a good idea to some people is absolutely beyond me. I've talked to a ton of people. Said, really? Does this make sense? Does a spring schedule really... I mean, we talked to Aaron Torres about it the other day, last week. And he's like, no, I don't understand, really, why people still talk about that. It doesn't make any sense on any level, even in the Patriot League. Patriot League officially no fall sports. And you go through and see, like, well, what teams were going to play them? So maybe that does make a case for, like I said, the Alabama game. If more schools end up losing the chance to play these smaller schools too, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we really are running out of options here. Maybe we do need to schedule a high marquee matchup in week 1. I'm telling you, a Big Ten SEC season wouldn't be such a bad deal. If we could escape this hellhole of a year with an SEC Big 12 college football season, I'd take it as a win. I think a lot of people would too. I would take that as a win all day long. This is just a start, too, for these smaller leagues. You telling me these smaller leagues aren't looking up, these smaller conferences aren't looking up to the Power Fives? That's why, too, the Greg Sankey comments hold so much weight for some of these people. They see somebody like the Patriot League sees somebody like Greg Sankey, king of college football, says, I have high worry that we're not going to play a season this year. And they go, well, we might as well just cut it off now. Telling me those comments didn't hold a lot of weight. They did. That's why those comments by Greg Sankey to me were idiotic to make this early. Send people into a frenzy. They're sending other conferences into a frenzy. Because you're naive to think that none of these conferences didn't take those comments with a grain of salt. Look. The SEC just said that. Oh my gosh, we got to do it. There's no point. We got to go after it right now. We got to stop it. The leadership amongst some of these conferences is lacking, to say the least. A lot of administration is afraid. I believe that to be the case. For a lot of reasons. I talked about it before that the Big Ten thought that was one of the reasons they came out and did what they did so early. The administration was afraid of how they would be talked about amongst media. Oh my gosh, they don't care. But also litigation issues. I've seen that brought up, and I completely believe that's an issue. They want to say, you know what, we'll have a season, and there's always going to be that one parent or that one person. Oh my gosh, my kid got coronavirus, I'm suing the school. Oh my gosh, we got coronavirus at the stadium. We're suing the school. So there was that talk of before that some players, they talked about the idea of trying to get players to sign waivers. I brought that idea up a long time ago. And there are people be like, well, that takes away. Look, what else are we going to do at this point? And it makes about as much sense as anything. Makes a little bit more sense than canceling non-conference games, for crying out loud. Especially right now. For anyone who actually thinks this is a good idea, tell me why. Why is it a good idea to cancel non-conference games, especially right now? I don't get it. Try to look through and understand the rationale, but all I see is an overreaction, plain and simple. Pac-12, Big Ten, ACC probably soon. Who's left standing? The SEC and the Big 12, and man, oh man, they better be left standing at the end. That's all I got to say. They better hope to stand at the end by themselves. Have a real shot to say what we're not going to buy in. We'll get into more of that in the 12 o'clock hour with Levi. The Washington Redskins are no longer the Washington Redskins. Probably the biggest news so far this morning. Came out last night that they said that this morning they would officially announce, which they did. And I'm curious, I want to know what you would name them now. It's been the new topic. What would you call the Washington Redskins? Since their name is now, who knows what it's going to be. Text it to me if you want. Call in, let me know. Again, you can text me at 417-489-0790. Tell me what the Redskins should be called. I've got a few ideas. I had a few ideas of what they should be called. And I'm going to tell you whether or not I have an issue with this, okay? Because people seem to be taking sides. As always, should the Redskins have changed their name? Should they not? Is it that big of a deal, or is it not? It's one side or the other. And the other problem with me, too, is here that this is just the start. This is just the start. How could this ultimately affect Oklahoma State? Because I think it could, down the road. I'll tell you what that is and tell you whether or not it's a good or bad thing that the Redskins are changing their name next on the Robert Allen and Friends Show. Welcome back. Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler filling in for Robert. You can listen in a bunch of different ways here, of course, as always, 1020 AM, 1580 AM, 93.1 FM, 93.3 FM, 105.1 FM, and the Triple Play Sports Radio app. Tons of different ways to get in on the action as well. Call in if you want, 533-1020, 533-1051. Hit my text line, social media, whatever. We will get your voice heard, promise. Biggest story of the day, at least so far this morning, is definitely the Washington Redskins changing their name. And, people, if I've been asked the question, well, which side am I taking here? Is there a side I should be taking? The thing is, first of all, I don't really care, first of all, about the Washington Redskins. I mean, they're a very bad football team. Sports-wise, could care less what they do because they don't matter. So I'll say that to start off with. On top of it, I do care about cancel culture. I've made that clear a bunch of times. Don't like it. Don't believe in it. But here's the thing. With the Redskins, do I get it? Yeah, I understand. I mean, that's... When you look at the name, yeah, I can understand why there would be some people that would say, look, we don't like that. And they have for a while. But my issue is that, to me, especially right now, it doesn't stop. Okay, because removing the Redskins name and logo is one thing. But the Cleveland Indians are next. And I think from what I read, they said that they're, at least for now, standing up to people calling for that name to be changed, saying, look, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it right now, and I commend them for that. And who else is next? My Kansas City Chiefs are next, man. The Kansas City Chiefs are next. I don't understand. From what I know, there was never any racist term regarded with the word chief. No, there were chiefs amongst Indian culture. So that to me would be like, okay, I don't really get what the point is there. But here's the thing: when they come after that, I'm gonna start having an issue. Okay, historically, one of the most historic franchises in the NFL, and trying to change a name because a few people are offended. Yeah, but cancel culture is a cancer. Okay, I've said that over and over. Cancel culture is a cancer. Why? Because it grows and grows and grows and never ends. Because this right here is a win for a lot of people, which again, I understand. Compared to other things, I get it. Redskins can be a derogatory term, right? I mean, but here's what also gets me. We see the talk from the owners saying, we sat down, we discussed this for a long time. We really looked into this and thought, this was going to be a change that we need to make. We discussed it. We went through all the options. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Daniel Snyder had said at one point a couple years ago, I think now, he wasn't changing the name. Because there had been outcry for it, and he said, I'm not going to do it. Well, then what happened to cause him to change? Big money stepped in. FedEx said, we're done. FedEx Field Air for the Redskins said, we're done. Until you change the name, we're done. Nike pulled all the Washington Redskins gear out of stores and said, we're done. That was a big hit to the franchise, monetary-wise, and guess what money does? It talks, and it did again. So I don't believe in, and I hope that everyone else didn't buy into the fact that this was a long sit-down discussion meeting. It wasn't. As soon as that came out, it was very clear what was going to happen. Look, that's the thing, is that when big money steps in and says, we're not going to send you paychecks anymore, attitudes change, moods shift pretty quick, and decisions follow suit pretty swiftly. Same case here in Washington. So now the question is, what's the new name going to be? How about the Washington Underachievers? Or the Washington Losers? Those are pretty fitting. If anybody else has a name, feel free to let me know. I've seen a lot of good ones floated out there. I think one of them originally was the Red Hawks was what I saw. It's kind of cool. Sounds kind of like a cool name to have. Maybe that happens. The new nickname will be announced at some later date here. You can go on and on about what they should be called. But my issue with it, as I said earlier, is that this is just the beginning in terms of name changing. The Indians, I said, would be next in Cleveland. Then the Kansas City Chiefs. And then at what point does it come down to, let's look at, if they get those wins, okay? The Indians' name is eventually changed. And the Chiefs' name is eventually changed. And go on and on with names that people find offensive or whatever. Then when does it become a point to where, oh man, the name Cowboys got to be changed? I don't think I'm crazy for floating this idea. Literally anything flies now. Cowboys were against the Indians, right? Back in the day, Cowboys, Indians. Don't tell me that's not next on the chopping block at some point. Maybe it starts in the NFL. Dallas has to change their name. Well, then maybe it trickles down to college. Oklahoma State's got to change their name. See, that to me is the issue. Because when people that are for cancel culture get out there and get a win, they're never satisfied. Until they turn on themselves, they are never satisfied. That's my problem with all this. Could care less about the Redskins changing their name. Don't care. I know a lot of people that came out, I've seen on social media, I've seen everywhere else, weren't offended by it before, weren't offended by it now. Some were. I get it. But I don't care. What I do care about is the idea that cancel culture has to be a part of everything in this world. And it's found its way into sports more than anything. That's the issue I have. It's not just names, but it's people too. You know, if somebody says something that people on Twitter don't like, we got to cancel them. If somebody doesn't agree with the popular opinion, we got to cancel them. That is an issue. Said it over and over again, and we got to get back to logical discussion. We got to get back to having constructive thoughts and arguments amongst each other. But that isn't the case. People don't want to do that. And it was proven this week. I'm going to save that topic for when we come back because it was a huge story this week in the news. In the sports news too, and in the news in general. But there was another story that cancel culture tried to play a part in. A little bit. I'll talk about that too. So again, let me know. Let me know what the Redskins' name should be. Get some names out there. Like I said, I'm going to have an issue when it comes closer to home in Kansas City. There's been talk already. People said, you know what? The Chiefs are next. Chiefs are next. I'm going to have a problem. I really am. This is something that needs to be dealt with everywhere too. There's people that are going to be like, okay, what exactly are you talking about when you look at it and you say cancel culture? When I say cancel culture, just like I said, I mean people go on social media or whatever and they say one thing that a lot of people disagree with, and the immediate response is, we have to have that person fired from their job, their platform taken away, whatever. That's cancel culture, and it can't happen anymore. People got to stand up to it. I'm not saying that the Redskins is this big cancel culture issue here, but it is the start to what could be something that people go, because that's the thing, right? With cancel culture, we do see a lot of people that eventually they might be for something, and then at some point they go, okay, that's where I draw the line. And there might be some people in Kansas City that do the same thing. They were for removing the Redskins name, but when it comes home to Kansas City, that's where I draw the line. Which I understand, but at the same time, wouldn't you rather just be all in or all out? I mean, I would. Think so, at least. We're going to get to later on an issue that involved a U.S. senator and the sports world this weekend. It was fascinating. This story is fascinating. I'm going to wait till hour number 2 to get into it because it's really good. It's really good. One of the things I want to hit on here before the end of the hour, a few teams have already come out in the NFL and said, when we come back, because we're coming back, we're going to have masks required at stadiums. I said this a long time ago that this would probably be the case, and it might be the case for college football too. I need to know from the listeners out there and everybody else, would you wear a mask to go to these games? I had said it, made it public, that I think I would wear a mask to go to a Chiefs game, and that would probably be it. Okay? That would probably be it. Now, obviously, when I'm going for work, the Oklahoma State football games, I got to wear one. That's different. But going to one based on whether I decide to or not, the only other sporting event I would go to and wear a mask the entire time would probably be a Chiefs game. But, man, it would be uncomfortable. You think it's uncomfortable wearing one now in some public places. Imagine trying to do it at a stadium. And here's my thing with it. I just don't understand how it's going to be enforced. I've said it over and over. If Oklahoma State comes out and says, we're going to have people wearing masks. You got to wear a mask to enter the facility. Okay, but then when this guy takes it off, what happens? Or when this guy takes it off, what happens? When everybody starts taking it off, what do you do? I think there's a lot more logistical details to dive into and work through than just saying it. But the Jaguars, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Green Bay Packers have all already come out and said masks will be required. And this is going to be an NFL thing overall. This won't just be few stadiums, few teams. This will be a widespread league issue here. A league mandate, probably. So I want to know, would you wear a mask, yes or no? Call in 533-1020, 533-1051. Hit the text line, 417-489-0790. Simple yes or no will do. And I'm curious, because this has been, so far, I asked this question a long time ago to some people, and I got literally a 50-50 response. Yeah, I'd do it. No. Heck no, I would. But a sporting event to me is a lot different than anywhere else. Because a lot of us have gotten used to wearing masks now already, right? Just walking around in public doing whatever. But a sporting event? Ooh, man. 3+ hours sitting there yelling for your team? Would you wear it? Or would you not? When we come back in hour number 2, I've got a lot to get to fill up this hour before Levi gets here with me at 12 o'clock. As I mentioned, one U.S. senator went after a sports league this weekend, and the response from that league was fantastic. We'll talk about who it was and what happened next on the Robert Allen Friend Show with Patrick Wheeler. It's hour number 2 of the Robert Allen Friend Show here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler hosting, filling in for Robert. Thanks for hanging out with me on Monday. Good start to your week. You're in the right spot here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network, the best sports talk you're going to find around. Regarding Oklahoma State as well. Oklahoma State, as we mentioned there, if you just tuned in to the second hour, 4-star offensive tackle Kelvin Banks has officially decommitted from Oklahoma State. It's part of that 2022 class. And his reasoning just said, I want to do what's best for me and my family. And I think that was a nice way of saying I got offers from a couple of top SEC schools, a couple of other big name schools, and I'd rather go there. Plain and simple. I don't think there was any ill will. I don't think there was any backtrack on Mike Gundy or anybody else or Casey Dunn or anything like that. I think it was just got a chance to go play at LSU, for crying out loud. I might do it. Am I being too straightforward and simple with that? I don't know. I don't think so. I like to put myself in that situation and think what I would do. What would you do? If Oklahoma State was your first offer, Power 5 offer, which they were at a younger age, you might jump on that. I mean, at that time, too, you have to think maybe Kelvin Banks was like, this might be my best shot. I go to play in a pretty good team in a Big 12 conference and get a chance there, and in a couple of years, and who knows what's going on with that team by then. This is a good shot, a good chance for me. But, more offers started rolling in, and it was, to me, simply a case of I've got to take a chance somewhere else. No, I don't blame him. But I do think that it's important for young players like this that get initial offers to sit back and wait before making a huge decision. Because, they always know they can decommit, but let's just say for the fan standpoint, sit back and wait, consider all options before making a decision sometimes. And that goes the same as life. But in this situation too. Okay, here's the story I got to get to. All right, this is really fascinating. This entire story over the weekend had me hooked. Curious how many people saw it, how many people read into it. It was pretty crazy from start to finish. I don't think it's really done yet, but for the most part, I mean, it was crazy. So over the weekend, sitting there, always checking news feed, checking the latest sports news, scrolling through Twitter, and I see Missouri Senator Josh Hawley. I'm like, okay, I don't see him on Twitter a ton. Whenever I'm looking through, he's usually not a big part of the sports news. Well, what exactly did he do? He wrote a letter to ESPN and the NBA, basically saying, because we've all seen the news where the NBA is going to allow players this year to have messages on the back of their jersey instead of their names. Those messages are in a list, all for the Black Lives Matter movement. And you get Hawley, who sends a letter and says, well, can other things be on there as well? Because the list that you put out doesn't include, and he said the ones I can remember are, for instance, Back the Blue, God Bless America, things like that. Free Hong Kong was one of them. His main reason for the letter was that, well, the NBA has said nothing regarding the Hong Kong situation in China. Hopefully everyone knows what's going on in China right now with Hong Kong. They want democracy and will not get it from the communist dictatorship there. Their free thinking has been stifled so much so that if they protest, they can get 5 years in jail. Recently, all literature was taken out of libraries that was about democracy. It's gone to that point. There are still enslavement camps all over China. I mean, it is a mess. So what does the NBA have to do with it? Well, they have a huge ties with China. A lot of money coming in from China to air games, to play games, all that. Nike, all that, go as far as you want. A lot of money comes in to them. So Hawley says, can a player have something like Free Hong Kong, for instance, on the back of their jersey? Is that allowed? He sent this to ESPN. He CC'd the media. Anyone who knows anything about the NBA knows who Adrian Wojnarowski is. Woj for short. Everyone knows him on Twitter as he drops the Woj bombs. What does that mean? Well, he is usually the top insider, gets the first breaking news around the NBA pretty much every time with ESPN. So he CC'd in this email from Josh Hawley. And his response to Josh Hawley was maybe the biggest Woj bomb of all time. It was two simple words. F you. But he actually wrote out the word. F you is what he said back. And my first thought was, and this is so true to this point in where we are in society, people like Adrian Wojnarowski that believe in one thing and refuse to listen to any argument about anything that goes against what they believe in or their worldview, refuse to be able to have or don't have the ability to have conversation about it, to intellectually comment about it. Their only response in a lot of ways is F you. I think this is a figurative response for a lot of things that Adrian Wojnarowski doesn't want to talk about or doesn't know how to talk about, and that includes the China situation with the NBA. He went out and apologized on Twitter. The ESPN actually suspended him for a couple of weeks without pay. I'm surprised they really did anything, to be honest. But it does prove, as we've seen in lots of situations, true colors of some people. The inability to have constructive response. This is a big deal. This was a United States Senator, okay? Josh Hawley in Missouri. I've never been more proud to be from the great state of Missouri than I am now, with Josh Hawley having the guts to come out and call the NBA on their blatant hypocrisy when it comes to the China situation. Everyone, I'm sure, remembers the Daryl Morey tweet. Houston Rockets owner, right, or GM, whichever he was, sent out that tweet. Pro-Hong Kong, believes in democracy. And he was ripped. China said they would take everything down. They would remove the NBA from China if this was not punished. What did the NBA do? They bent the knee and they punished Daryl Morey. LeBron James ripped him. Steve Kerr, who's very outspoken with social justice issues, was asked about it, and he said it's a tough issue. Doesn't know how to really respond to that. But they had plenty to say about Woj getting suspended, including LeBron James tweeting out the hashtag Free Woj. Free him. He's in ESPN jail. He did nothing wrong. All he said was F you to a U.S. senator. That's not wrong. I said I would tie cancel culture into this, and I will again. Here's the thing. I wouldn't say that I would want Adrian Wojnarowski to be fired or removed from position because he said that back. He has the right to respond that way. But I do believe it's fair to point out that, first of all, how dumb it is to respond to an email with something like that. Here I am again. I feel like I have beat my head into a brick wall wondering why in the world people respond and still don't understand that things they send out in text messages, in emails, whatever else, never go away. They don't just disappear. You take the chance of being exposed with whatever you put out there. And he did that. He had to have thought, I mean, this is how irrational this response was. Oh my gosh, another guy that's responding without thinking. Seems pretty familiar, doesn't it? CC Big Ten, CC Pac-12. Seems a little familiar. Here we go again. But it blows my mind that people, especially in the media and the sports world, don't they understand that it's better to not say anything sometimes, especially on a platform where it can be found always? Don't they understand that it's best to just not say anything sometimes? I mean, did Adrian Wojnarowski really have to respond to this? And if he did he think this was the best way? Am I crazy for thinking this way? To me, it seems pretty common sense, but I guess it's not. Bottom line, when people like Adrian Wojnarowski respond with something like this, it proves to me that they are incapable of doing what most mature, free-thinking adults are capable of doing, and that's sitting down, discussing why they disagree with something. Doesn't happen anymore. Josh Hawley responded after the suspension, said, look, I don't care. I don't want, he said to ESPN, don't suspend Adrian Wojnarowski. Answer me why there can be no free Hong Kong on the back of these jerseys. Answer me why the NBA is censoring their players. That's all he wanted. He said that again. I also thought it was pretty interesting because it was the day I had Jason Whitlock on the show from Outkick. He comes on Twitter when he put that post on, Hawley did, and he tagged Outkick in it. How great was that? Let's go to the phone line. You're on the Robert Allen Friend Show with Patrick Wheeler. Go ahead.
Patrick, I missed some of what you had just said. I'm out counting calves. We've had rain up here. You got to watch where you're going and everything. And
yes, sir.
I didn't hear what you'd said probably even 20, 30 minutes ago about what you felt about Washington changing its name and how it might affect Oklahoma State and different things. I live up here in north central Oklahoma, a couple of small schools, Cherokee. Waukeeta no longer has a football team, basketball team. You know, we've co-opted with, or I guess we joined with Medford. But the Waukeeta Warriors and the Cherokee Chiefs, there was always pride in those names.
Sure.
Nothing offensive. You wanted to be a big, proud, strong, brave, or the Indians. It just gets me that people are hanging on to stuff. People that, are so far removed generation-wise, and I would think they would be prideful that their heritage was being, well, not glorified, but used in a good, strong way like that. And then you said about it might affect Oklahoma State, and my thoughts just went to the Cowboys, and Cowboys will always be proud to be a emblem of a school. If you wouldn't mind repeating a little bit about what you thought about some of that stuff.
Yep.
The Washington Redskins, totally against them changing their what they're doing, totally against that. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I can do that. Yeah, thanks for the phone call. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah, well, and here I'll start with this because I think that caller makes a good point, and that's why I think when I talk about the Indians and the Chiefs or whatever, that it, if anything, right, it is glorifying the heritage of those people. Like, you have a franchise, a huge billion-dollar-plus franchise in the biggest sports stages of all time with that name. I would think that would be pride for a lot of people of that heritage. Like, oh, look, there's a full team that has the name Indians, or a full team that has the name Chiefs. Like, I'm proud of that. I think that would be the response of most people for that. Now, I said it again. Look, I understand the Redskins thing. I get it. I mean, I think that's obviously something that can be justified. But what I did say, too, at the same time was, look, I really don't care about what Washington does with their name simply because I don't care about their team. I think their team is pretty worthless. But at the same time, what I do care about is, as that caller wanted to know, cancel culture. Said it again. I think this is, unfortunately, the start to more of what's going to come. Because, look, are there some people that want the Redskins name changed, but maybe that's good enough for them? Yeah, sure. But I promise you, there is a lot of them that want the Redskins name changed, but also will not stop there. Because I said this is a win for those people. They see this happening. They see big names like FedEx and Nike jumping on and saying, we're no longer going to fund this team until the name is changed. For them, that's a win. So what's next? As I just said, they will not be satisfied until the Kansas City Chiefs change their name. They will not be satisfied until the Cleveland Indians change their name. Until the Florida State Seminoles change their name. And what I said with Oklahoma State was, and Dallas, how long before those same people think, you know what? Since I'm still not satisfied because I never will be, the Cowboys were against the Indians back in the day. Maybe we should go after Dallas. Maybe we should go after Oklahoma State. I mean, there might be some people that think, well, that's pretty crazy to think. I mean, is it really, though? I mean, really? In this time that we live in, is it crazy to think? People go after this type of thing all the time. There's been a lot of things that we've seen in the recent history now that we never would have thought would happen. Who's to say that this couldn't be part of it? I think it's a fair argument, at least a fair thought to put out there. And again, would I be surprised if that were ever to come to light, to possibly going after them? No, I wouldn't be surprised. Why should I be? I mean, would anybody else? Really? With the way things are going? With cancel culture? I wouldn't be surprised at all. Let's go back to the phone lines. You're on the Robert Allen and Friends Show. Go ahead.
Well, I think that maybe a bridge too far as far as the Cowboys. It's basically, the retired generals from the Union Army that drove and massacred the Indians. The way they fictionalized in the movies they made, the 50s and 60s, the Cowboys and Indians, that really, yeah, you had some altercations, interactions between ranchers and Native Americans, but really don't want to put too much of an onus on, quote, the cowboy culture as being the reason that the mass extinction or driving Native Americans to extinction. It really had more to do with, generals like General Sheridan and Sherman after the Civil War that led to most of that.
Sure, and what I would say to you is, but at the same time, we've seen things like the USS Grant statue being taken down, and then the Washington statues being, they're going after that now. Well, guess what? He started this nation. I mean, to me, that's why I'm saying that there's really no limit to what some of these people would go after. Because would you honestly be surprised if these same people one day didn't think, you know what? To me, and enough of them would say that the cowboy, the mascot is offensive, and we're going to go after it. I mean, would you really be surprised?
I think that would be kind of more fringes. I think what you got to address is the mainstream thought behind it and the righteous thought behind it, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's, Native American concerns and issues. And I think, you're always going to have, on any issue, you're going to have somebody that just takes this very extreme point of view. So could that happen? But yeah, I don't think it would happen to the extent there would be enough of a movement or impetus behind it to actually cause those things. Again, we're just offering opinions. I understand that. But I think, I didn't know about Ulysses S. Grant. I know that his father was extremely strict was an abolitionist. So I'm not exactly certain why, other than the fact he was the president that ordered are you talking that his statue was taken down due to Native American concerns?
No, his statue was taken down because of during all this, the Black Lives Matter and all that. That it was another statue taken down, and that's the thing is that he was a big part of slaves being freed ultimately and all that too. And the thing is that people that go after these statues, these names, I think with that issue I just mentioned and other things, we realize a lot of them they don't know what they're doing. I mean, it comes to a point where it's like, we're going to take this down, but it's without even understanding what it stood for, and that's where I think we are.
I mean, he certainly was not. I mean, not only did he fight on the side of the Union, he was a strict abolitionist.
Right.
I mean, completely. Whereas now, if you wanted to charge his character or he certainly was, president of the United States, and there were several presidents in there that, due to westward expansion and so, kept moving the Indians and breaking treaties that that the U.S. government had signed 40 years prior, moving them. So he was certainly part of that. So that I could certainly see where Native Americans could take umbrage with Ulysses S. Grant. I don't see it from the Black Lives Matter, but you're right. I mean, I think sometimes these things get confused, and it's like people almost forget. Why are we out here protesting? Do we really understand our own nature of what the protest is about?
Right.
Anyway, hey, I appreciate you taking my call.
Yeah, thanks for the call. I really do appreciate that too. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Not saying that it's everybody. I mean, there are plenty of people that are protesting still or whatever that have good reason behind it, and if you ask them, probably could tell you. But there are also some that, for instance, with the Ulysses S. Grant and all that, it's like, what? Do you understand what he did, what he was a part of? I mean, that's why even with the Cowboys not being such a huge thing, really, in history, like that guy said, but at the same time, I'm telling you, a lot of people that would get behind this, they don't care about that. They care about being perpetually offended and going after things. And that's where we are. So yeah, maybe it could be on paper, you hear that and you go, man, going after the Cowboys name might be a little far-fetched. But really, is anything far-fetched anymore? I think that's fair to ask. I mean, there are plenty of different names, plenty of different statues, whatever, that were put up for good reason. At least some people would think, right? But this just doesn't matter to some people. So it may never change, and my goodness, I hope it doesn't. Because I think at that point, that's where some people would say, okay, that's going too far. Like I mentioned earlier, there may be some people that are upset with this name or that name or this statue or that statue, whatever. But when it comes down to something that may mean a little bit more to them all of a sudden, okay, that's a little too far, right? That's a response we're going to hear. Yeah, that's where we are. And I think that the idea, again, of, I said this a bunch of times, I think it's worth repeating. I understand the Washington Redskins thing. I get it. I'm not one to sit here and say, yeah, that's an appropriate name. I mean, but I do also believe that hopping on the cancel culture train is not a place to be. It's not. This country was built on free thinking. The naming of teams was built on free thinking. Why have we moved away from discussing it instead of the initial reaction being, we got to get rid of it? That's where my issue lies. I was talking about the NBA issue with the Josh Hawley stuff before this. Look, I think it bears repeating too that Josh Hawley here took some guts to do what he did. I mean, the NBA has been in China's pocket for a long time, right? We all know that. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. I remember that time, it was pretty recently, back when fans were still in the stands in the NBA games, a fan was holding up a sign, and it said, go whatever team he was with. The camera pans to him from ESPN. He quickly changed it to a sign that says Free Hong Kong. And the camera quickly pans away and gets away from it. And again, where does it all boil down to? The NBA receives a lot of money from China. Think they're going to upset them? No. Absolutely not. When we come back, I think I'm going to try to fit in Aaron Torres back with me again. He came in last week and talked college football, college basketball. He would be great to hear from what in the world he thinks is going on with the Big Ten, with the Pac-12. Where could this lead the Big 12 and the SEC to go? See if I can't get him on next here. The Robert Allen and Friends Show with Patrick Wheeler on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Welcome back to the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler filling in. We'll get Fox Sports' Aaron Torres on with us here before too long. I believe he said he'll try to find some time here between now and 1 o'clock to give us a call. So we'll get him on at some point. With everything going on in college football, we're going to ask him a ton of stuff about, the interest around here, the Big 12. What does that mean? I'm going to ask him, does the Big 12 have a shot here to make a statement? Maybe he agrees, maybe not. We'll see. Before we get to that, we'll continue on with some of what we were talking about. Look, I encourage you, if you haven't yet, to... Because when I talk about the NBA situation, I'm not saying that just from a sports angle. I'm saying from a world angle. I mean, the idea of freedom, I think it's important. Obviously, something that we take for granted every day in the United States of America. Well, if you care about that, I'd encourage you to look up the story I was talking about. Josh Hawley had enough. And I think what was interesting is he also posted and said, look, it wasn't just me. There's a bunch of politicians that are worried about the issues with the NBA and China. Which, fair to call out. I mean, really. All right, let's go to the phone line. I believe Aaron is with us. Aaron, is that you, man?
Yeah, I'm here, man. What's going on?
Hey, I appreciate you coming on late notice, man. I was thinking to myself, you know what? We've had so much college football stuff, and it just continues to come down that I had to see what Aaron thought about all this. Aaron Torres joining us here on the Robert Allen Friends Show with Patrick Wheeler. I think that obviously the first part with the Big Ten coming out. First of all, were you surprised that, because it seemed like almost to this point it was inevitable that some Power 5 conference was going to change up something. Were you surprised that it was the Big Ten first? Because I always said the Pac-12 would be first.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I live in Pac-12 country here in California, and I think that, everybody was kind of pointing, and I live actually in California too, and I think everyone spent most of the offseason pointing a finger at California and saying, you're going to screw up college football for everybody this year, guy, and get your act together. And, listen, some of the stuff about the virus and stuff has been a little bit misreported. I've kind of tried to set the record straight as best I can. But, am I surprised it was the Big Ten? Not really. I mean, the Big Ten, we know how they act up there and, the Midwest. And, they act like, they're holier than thou. And, it's about sports, but it's about the balance of sports and academics and all that stuff. And they do have some good academic universities, but I wasn't really surprised that the Big Ten was first. I guess I was surprised from the perspective that, we had been told all along, and people that I had talked to all along were saying, like, the Power Fives are in this together. They're fighting this fight together. A decision will come as a group. And so for one of them to go rogue the way that they did, I think that's surprising more than anything else. And then you hear over the weekend, whether it's Joe Castiglione, whether it's Greg Sankey, other people in college athletics even admitting they were surprised by the Big Ten's decision when they made it.
I was saying here in Stillwater that, I was pretty proud of what Bob Bowlesby said initially. Was like, look, kind of like you said, hey, this was to us a little bit of a premature response. And I kind of want to know what you think about, for instance, with the Pac-12 now and the Big Ten, with some of these games that they are canceling. To me, I said that if anything, would have made a little bit more sense to cancel specific games and try to find different opponents. If you look at what they're citing, travel issues, the spread of the virus and all that, would that have made more sense to you? Was to maybe pick apart some games and fill different opponents instead of just saying, you know what, no non-conference at all?
Yeah, it's a great question, Patrick. I don't know how all these contracts work. I don't know if you can break one without breaking the other. And, if Michigan is going to Washington, can they play? Can they get out of that contract without getting out of whoever is the local school that they're going to play out of the MAC? I don't really have, I'm not really privy to that information, but I do kind of think it was kind of an all or nothing deal, just from the perspective that, like I said, there's just too many moving parts. And the other perspective, which I think is really important, it's something other people have discussed, I'm not claiming it as my own idea, is I think what is going into a lot of the Big Ten's thinking here, and I talked about it on my podcast this morning, I encourage people to go listen to it, is that I think the Big Ten thinks, even though geographically some of the games that we canceled actually make sense on paper, Iowa State, there's a bunch of MAC schools that are right nearby, we have kind of testing protocols across the board in this league, and we know when Michigan takes the field against Iowa or Wisconsin or Penn State that, Penn State is taking this virus as seriously and testing as often as Michigan is, which is something you can't just say even about other Power 5 schools and certainly the Group of 5 schools as well. And so it's no knock on the MAC, it's no knock on the Sun Belt, it's no knock on those kinds of places. But the reality is, with more money, being made, if anybody's actually making money right now, but you know what I'm saying, with more revenue, you can test more, you can quarantine better, all that stuff. And so I think the Big Ten's kind of thought process is, let's get our teams on the field with schools that we know are taking it as seriously as the ones that they'll be playing.
Aaron Torres joined us here on the Robert Allen Friend Show with Patrick Wheeler. Were you surprised to see a conference like the Patriot League officially announce they're having no fall sports at all?
I'm not, and it's funny because, everyone talks about the Ivy League being the first domino, but I actually thought the Patriot League a few weeks ago kind of made an announcement that went a little bit under the radar, which I thought was actually the first sign in the wrong direction, which was they made the announcement that all of their schools they were requiring all of their schools to play schools within a bus ride of their campus, and that teams wouldn't be able to stay overnight. You drive out in the morning, you play a game, you leave that night, and it kind of got shuffled under the radar, but there were 2 or 3 FBS teams that had a Patriot League team scheduled, including Hawaii. I don't know if you've ever been to Hawaii, Patrick. I went last year. It was a great trip. But it's not easy to get a bus to Hawaii, let alone from Pennsylvania or New York or wherever all these schools are.
Good point.
So that was the first game that was kind of on the brink, and I don't think any official announcement was made if they could figure out a way to play it. But the Patriots even out a little bit in front of the Ivy League in terms of saying, like, we don't know if we can get a product safely on the field. And so I wasn't really surprised when I saw this announcement today, but I do feel bad for those student athletes. I mean, I know we've talked about it a lot the last week and a half. Ivy League football, Patriot League football is not the same as the SEC or the Big 12, but it doesn't mean those kids aren't working hard. It doesn't mean that they don't love the sport, and I do feel bad for them that they might not get a season this year.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the right thing to say. I mean, I've said that too. It's those guys still, it's their lives. They work forward this whole time, and then now look. But when it comes to, for instance, the SEC, with Greg Sankey coming on over the weekend saying, look, it's high to a very high, worrisome that they might not have a football season at all. I mean, I thought a little bit that those comments were like, okay, the timing, first of all, was bad. PR is not good at that point. What did you think of those comments he made this weekend, and how much truth do you think they could hold?
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder. One, I don't think he's wrong, and I'm not I'm not a doctor. I don't claim to be, but it does feel like no matter how you crunch the numbers, they're trending in the wrong direction. Especially, by the way, in many SEC states, though not all of them. But I really think that part of it too was a little bit of a PR thing, right? Is like, we got to start taking this thing seriously, or we're going to have to cancel something that is sacred to all of our schools, all of our fan bases, and all of the states that they reside in. And so, when I look at it, I'm still a believer that I just don't think spring football is really realistic for the Power Fives. If anything, I could even see a scenario where it's a hybrid season where you kind of start – if things don't get better, you keep pushing back, hope to start October 1st or October 15th or whatever, and play into January, February. But I bring all this up to say I still just don't see the scenario where you can start a season, start practice in January, February, play games in February, March, April, and then ask kids to report back ideally for training camp the following June when the season doesn't end until April 15th. I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's realistic to play essentially 2 seasons in one calendar year. And I still think the Power Fives, and obviously the Group of Five will fall in after them, is going to do everything they can to figure out a way to get in as much football as they can throughout the fall period. And then obviously, look, are things going to look different? Yes, they already do. They already will with the Big Ten and the Pac-12. But, it's just one of those deals where I really don't believe starting the season in January and February is really feasible. And then on top of that, you got to talk about the scenario of, is it even healthier, is it even safer, let alone is it feasible for all the other reasons, economically and things like that.
It's interesting you bring up that point. I had heard some news. I'm not sure if it's completely confirmed. I think it was last time I checked, but Missouri State, where I'm from, in Springfield area in Missouri, talking about trying to get the date for their game against Oklahoma moved up a little bit.
Yep.
Did the idea of that to you ever occur, before when all this talk was going on, that, what if we moved the season up some? Would that actually make more sense?
I definitely think it crossed my mind. And then, unfortunately, when Clemson reported back and LSU reported back and Kansas State reported back, you realize that this thing, we haven't beaten this thing back the way that we had hoped, and it's going to be a little bit more of a process. It is something that certainly crossed my mind, and if I understand correctly, and I know you're in Oklahoma, so you have a better feel for what may be going on, I actually think it kind of makes sense. Is if you think about it, is I think what Oklahoma is trying to say is like, look, we can protect our guys, but we don't know what's going to happen once we take on a bunch of other guys from another team. So let's move this thing a week up. Let's play our game a week earlier, and then if we test on Sunday and all of a sudden, we have 40 cases or 30 cases because there was an outbreak during the game and the physical contact was actually a bad thing, one, we at least know that, and two, we can kind of quarantine guys and potentially get them ready for the second game, which is obviously this year against Tennessee. And so I think that's the logic. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I actually commend, Oklahoma. And I think it also speaks to, by the way, what you said a minute ago with Bob Bowlesby's comments is that, I'll admit on Thursday when the news came down about the Big Ten, I thought, okay, it's a matter of if not when all 5 of these Power Fives go to a league-only schedule.
Right.
And I think some of these other conferences, specifically the Big 12 and the SEC, are trying to figure out a way to play some semblance of a full season.
Yeah, I've said that before. Aaron Torres here joining us on the Robert Allen Friend Show with Patrick Wheeler. I've said that before that, this whole time I think, and even when the announcements came out, when the coronavirus was kind of first surging and everything, we talked about, all these Power 5 conferences, except maybe the SEC and the Big 12, are going to say, you know what? We're going to have football. So in this case, do you also see it as maybe an opportunity for the SEC and the Big 12 to be like, okay, we'll let the Big 10, the ACC, and the Pac-12 fall, but we're the power conferences, we're the big daddies when it comes to football. We're still going to play.
Well, I think what it comes down to for me is, I think on top of everything else, I do think there's like a tactical advantage to it, right? Especially from the SEC. I mean, if you're going to a situation where the Big Ten's looking at potentially 10 conference games, the ACC maybe, down the road goes to 9 conference games, plus pretty much everybody else is playing Notre Dame. Isn't it a tactical advantage to only play, 8 league games and then fill out the schedule with a bunch of, South Alabamas and Troys, and maybe you're able to keep some of those regional rivalries against the ACC? I don't know. To me, it makes a lot of sense. I think the Big 12, one, is in a similar situation. I think the Big 12 is also looking at it and I'll give credit to a guy in your state, Chris Plank, a good friend of mine at Fox Sports Radio. We had him on our show this weekend, and he said, look, you think about it from the Big 12 perspective, there's only 9 opponents. So are you going to play one less game than potentially all the other Power 5 conferences? Are you going to play a team for a second time, potentially a third time in a Big 12 championship game? And so I think there are some logistical reasons, like I just said with the Big 12, but also some really inherent strategic reasons if you're the SEC to try to keep the schedule as is. Now, we already know some of these games have been canceled, Alabama, USC most notably, but I think it's kind of an interesting stylistic, strategic thing from the SEC of, if we can keep this thing at 8 conference games, that's actually a huge advantage for our teams in our conference as opposed to the Big Ten and potentially some of these other schools, across the country.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. When we love to float this idea over here because it's just fun to talk about. But Oklahoma State losing their Week 1 opponent now in Oregon State, and as you said, Alabama losing USC. What would be the chances in your mind of that happening?
I really don't know. Obviously, look, Alabama loves opening up with a marquee opponent. Traditionally, it's been on a neutral field, and I think the question becomes, does Oklahoma State go there, go to Tuscaloosa without a guarantee of a return? Vice versa, I think it's wishful thinking at this point. And then would Mike Gundy even want to take his team there? Because as we discussed last week, Oklahoma State has a real roster that can compete for a Big 12 title and potentially, who knows, maybe even a college football playoff berth. And so if you're now scheduling in, and this is no disrespect, but I think most of your listeners will understand, if you're scheduling in a loss, that kind of hurts your chances to go to the college football playoff.
Right.
And so it's such an unprecedented year. I just can't see it. And then, oh, by the way, here's the other thing. Does Oklahoma State, even if they can get Alabama to come to Stillwater, do you even want them there in a situation where there's probably going to be few, if any, fans? So, listen, if you want to start banging the drum for that game, I can get it going on my end, but I don't know how realistic it is, and I don't even know if Oklahoma State fans would want it, to be honest.
I said, and I'm curious what you think about this too, because I think there would be good and bad from it. The good would be, if Oklahoma State were to pull it off, okay, let's say they pull it off, the initial response, I think, would shift all of a sudden a little bit from the media to, oh my gosh, Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy have it together. In an offseason, there was, with a lot of issues going on, wow, maybe they actually got together and everything's going well and the changes were made and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, the storyline changes. So that's the really, really good on top of a win. But obviously, like you said, the bad is a loss possibly to start the season, is no good chance to get into the playoff, and everything else, obviously, with the team like Oklahoma State has. I've also kind of thrown in there, and you may or may not agree, that this is a little bit of a different. This isn't your typical Alabama team. They've got some question marks in places they usually don't. So I don't know. Is there good and bad maybe in that scenario for you too?
Yeah, there is, and I think even if you don't win, if you're competitive, I think the narrative then shifts to, oh, we forgot. Like, Mike Gundy's a really good coach, and I know the last couple seasons haven't quite gone as planned, but I mean, we all know if there was a 14 playoff in 2011, Oklahoma State would have been in it. There's been other 10-plus win seasons, and I think for all the scorn that he's gotten this offseason, I do think people are kind of forgetting, like there's a reason he's been at Oklahoma State for 15 years now.
Right.
And it's not just because Tennessee has a job opening every year and, they can only try to hire him 3 or 4 times a decade. But, he's a really good coach, and he's been really successful. And there's a reason he's been at that school for 15 years. And so to me, I do think there's a lot of good that could come out of it. I still think the likelihood of it is probably relatively slim. I don't want to say none. You would know if none is on the table more than I would, but I would say relatively slim for sure.
Yeah, that's basically what I've gone with as well, too. Aaron Torres joining me here on the Robert Allen and Friends show with Patrick Wheeler. If it were up to you, would you really be too upset if it came down to simply, mostly at least a Big 12 SEC college football season?
No, I mean, I really wouldn't. I think every conference has to do what's best for them. Listen, I'm at the point, and I think most fans are at the point, I think we all just want to see a product on the field. And it's funny because I talked about this today on my podcast is, I was really beat up when the Big Ten made the announcement on Thursday, but I do think in some ways you can look at it as a positive in the sense that the Big Ten feels like this is the safest bet for them to get actual games on the field and actual product on our televisions. And if it means sacrificing Oregon, Ohio State, and Washington, Michigan for, 12 weeks of Big Ten football that's actually going to happen, I think most people will take that. And so, I think that we are at this point now that I don't really care how the product gets on the field, and it goes without saying, we're all in the same boat. Whenever you say stuff like this, too, so you don't care about the safety of the players. No, I care about the safety of the players. Like, I want the players to be safe. I don't want anybody, seriously ill or anything like that. But whatever is the way we get games on the field, I am in favor of. If that means the SEC thinks their best path is to play a full schedule, I'm in favor of that. If it means it's conference only, I feel bad for the smaller schools. It's crazy. I'm a UConn alum, and a lot of people forgetting this. UConn football is actually going to independence for the first time ever this year. As basketball transitions to the Big East, they've already lost two games off their schedule because they were scheduled to play 2 Big Ten teams. So I feel awful for these athletic departments in these small schools. But if it means that we get an SEC schedule with only SEC games or Big 12 with only SEC games and the alternative is no football at all, I will absolutely, positively 100% take that.
Well, I got to ask you because you kind of brought it up, and part of my reaction to the Big Ten was, first I thought it was a little bit of jumping the gun here, but I also said that, I wonder how much of it truly is the commissioner, these presidents, these ADs, all saying, or even being a little bit afraid of what would happen if they didn't say what they said, and they get the backlash from the media and everyone else. Like you said, oh my gosh, they don't care about the players' health. They're just going out there trying to get money and get football players out there. Do you think that played a part in any of their decision making?
I think it's all part of it. Yeah, no, I do. And so like it's tough to draw the line of. And here's the thing, and this is what I would say, Patrick, and I know you know this, but for anybody listening in the car, at work, whatever, we're all flying blind here. And when I say we, I'm not just talking about you and I in the media. I'm talking about Greg Sankey. I'm talking about Bob Bowlesby. I'm talking about Lincoln Riley. I'm talking about Mike Gundy. Mm-hmm. We're all trying to figure this out on the fly here. And so with the Big Ten, I think there's a number of different reasons why they went to this. I think they believe it's the safest way to get a product on the court. I think they believe that maybe potentially it's a PR win for them of how safely they're taking it. I actually think some of it might be financially. They might be able to get out of some of these buy games where they're going to pay $1.5 million to some MAC school. Now they can potentially maybe get out of it. And so I think there's a number of different reasons, and I don't think the Big Ten had one specific reason. but I think they're just doing what they think is best for their conference schools. And that's the point that I'm trying to get across here, is the idea that we're all just trying to figure this out on the fly, man. And I do think at the end of the day, whether it's the Big Ten commissioner all the way down to the ops guy at Oklahoma State, we all kind of understand what's at stake here if we don't get a football season on the field. What happened at Stanford last week is going to happen across the country, where they cut 11 sports.
Yeah.
There's going to be carnage if there's no football on the field. And so I think it was for a number of different reasons. One of them may be a little bit PR related, but I think at the end of the day, the Big Ten's just trying to be like, dude, we're just trying to get a product on the field like everybody else is. For us, this is the safest bet. And if we don't, none of us are going to have jobs next year, pretty much, except for maybe Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh. So,
well, hey, good thing you and I are in the opinion business right now. At least that's definitely a plus. Hey, last, last
the sports business though, which I'm not sure is the best business to be in at this particular moment.
Yeah, that's why I like to focus more on the opinion side of it for now, because we still have
I wish
that.
I covered the MLS right now. I'd feel a lot more confident. But
oh my
anyway,
goodness,
go ahead,
yeah, you're absolutely right. Final question. In your best guess, in your best estimation here, does the Big 12 and the SEC, do they ultimately, because I've kind of counted the ACC already into the corner as well, of we're not going to have non-conference games there either. So does the Big 12 and the SEC, do they stand tall and say, look, we're going to have a normal schedule, or do they also go no non-conference games?
I just don't. I think eventually they do go conference only. I really do. And I do think they're going to wait it out a little bit, certainly the two conferences that you referenced. But I just, again, I don't claim to be a doctor, and I try not to give my personal opinions, because I think a lot of what's going on in our country is being misreported right now. But are the numbers going to be that much better come even August 1st that we feel confident that come September 1st we're going to be good to go? I just don't think so. And I think at this point, the Big Ten proved that it's all about protecting your own you-know-what. It's about protecting your brand, your product, your member institutions. And so I think the SEC wants to go forward for the reasons I said. I think the Big 12 certainly wants to go forward, and I give credit even to Oklahoma for trying to figure out creative ways to keep the schedule as is. But, again, it just comes down to maybe we need those couple extra weeks in September. Maybe we need those couple extra weeks between September 1st and December 1st in case we have to cancel a game or two or postpone a game or two. I hate to say it, I really do think so. I hope I'm wrong on this, but I think eventually we all end up with league-only schedules for pretty much everybody in college football.
That's Aaron Torres joining me here on the Robert Allen and Friends Show with Patrick Wheeler. You can follow him on Twitter at Aaron_Torres, and make sure you check out that podcast he mentioned, the Aaron Torres podcast. It is fantastic. Aaron, my man, I appreciate you coming on last minute with me. Thanks for spending some time with me. And hey, I hope I also agree at the end there. I hope you're wrong, but man, yeah, there's some trends that aren't going the right way, but hopefully we get some college football this season, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you, Patrick. Have a great day.
You too, bud. All right, Aaron Torres joining me here on the Robert Allen Friends Show. Yeah, he's you got to check out that podcast. Again, if you have not done that, he has a lot of good guests on there. If you're interested in college football, college basketball around the nation, he's definitely the guy to go to. We'll be right back with one final segment before we get to the 12 o'clock hour, and Levi Peckinpah will join me. That's next on the Robert Allen and Friends Show. It's the Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler filling in one more day here for Robert, as we've dug into a lot today. It has been a busy day, busy Monday in the sports world. Thank you to Aaron Torres there coming on with me again last minute. He's got it all when it comes to the college landscape, and it was interesting because, as Levi joins me now here for a couple minutes before we get to the 12 o'clock hour, it was interesting because I asked him, what did you think about the Big Ten? And, his response initially was, down the line, I think it makes sense what they did because they want to get some sort of a product out there on the field. Now, I still disagree with the fact that they claim to be reading all this data and the data's telling them they should do this. I'm like, come on, really? Just why I see it, I don't think that. But other people do. But he also agreed that I think that's a solid point, right? Maybe that maybe if you look at it through the lines here a little bit, they are trying to say, let's at least get some games. I mean, the only games that people care about really are in conference, right, for the most part. So maybe on that level, do you see that making sense for why they did it?
Yeah, I can truly see that, because that's the closest we can possibly get to getting football on the field, and I think we're all here for trying to get football on the field, even though we're also wanting to keep these players as safe as possible. And this is probably the safest way, because whenever you're going with the non-conference, some of these guys are going to have to travel from long distances. Maybe it's not your certain team in the Big 10 or ACC, Big 12, but it's other people having to go travel some long distances, and at that point you're just wanting to stop that at all, so that way you have as little contact with other people that you don't know the results of whether they have COVID or not. So you're just wanting to try to nip it in the bud as quick as possible, and that is the quickest way possible to do that.
Just so you know, he wasn't completely out on the idea of Oklahoma State, Alabama to start off the season. He said he's like, you know what, I'll pitch it out there. I'm good for it, and that's a good idea. But at the same time, he was like me. I think pretty slight chance.
Yeah.
But he did also agree with, and I'm curious what you think too, real quick, is the goods and the bads that would come from it. Is the good would be, and this is best case scenario. Okay, they win. Now it doesn't have to be. Right. It can be sloppy. It can be the worst offensive game, whatever. But if they win 13-10 or something like that, it's like, okay, whoa. Or even if they won, 56-50, it's like, okay. And at the same time, the storyline would be like, Mike Gundy has it together. The Oklahoma State football team came together. There would be big pluses with that. Right. If they lose, it's one loss. Start off the season. That's tough to get to have in a Big 12 team that's trying to get into the college football playoff. And on top of that, it's a team where and this maybe falls in the good category too, that I've said I don't believe in Alabama completely this year. They're still Alabama,
right?
But not like they used to be in Oklahoma State. Might just have the ingredients to pull some sort of an upset.
Right. For everything when it comes to this season, and for Oklahoma State, if they hit the right notes, it can go and be a great season. If you go up against Alabama, Alabama hasn't figured everything out. I mean, they're still going to have that Alabama defense, great Alabama wide receiver core. QB is the big thing for Alabama that they're still trying to figure out. So there's a good chance where you can just strike them while they're kind of cold and maybe get a spark, and hey, you go beat Alabama. But there's also the thing of you could end up losing and you lost to Alabama, one of the greats in college football, which honestly, having a loss to start off the season is terrible, but it's against Alabama. You're not losing to like Central Michigan, which that one always strikes Oklahoma State in the heart a lot, but you're not getting a loss against a nobody team. You're not losing to Oregon State. You're not losing to Tulsa if you ever get in that type of scenario. You're losing to one of the best teams in the country and will be one of the best teams in the country no matter what anybody says.
Yeah, threw that out there too. Even if they lost but were competitive, you keep that in the back of the mind of the college football playoff committee.
Oh, yeah, and it could be a big spark to where you can start a lot of storylines with Chuba Hubbard, Tyler Wallace,
big time,
getting those guys forward. But again, just overall, even if you lose, I mean, that would be probably their best loss for the non-conference. I mean, since it's been a long time. So if that were to happen and things were to go that wrong and you lose, it's still not bad because, again, it's losing to Alabama.
Yeah, exactly right. I think there's a lot of upside, but I'm just like Aaron. I think the chances of it, at least now, are slim. But hey, 2020, literally anything can happen.
I think it is the Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah, this year, anything, there is a chance. Yes. I mean, it's crazy. When we come back for the final hour, we have a ton to talk about. The best topic we'll get to is the NBA. Is the bubble going to be punctured, and would it be punctured by the females that are going to be invited in? Because they're going to be invited in. On top of that, my favorite NBA player just announced tested positive for the coronavirus. I'll tell you who that is. That sucks. We'll get into some more college football. The Patriot League officially done. They will not have fall sports at all this season. We'll get to all of that and much more. I've also got a question I got to float to Levi, something that a certain Baltimore Ravens running back said about a certain Kansas City Chiefs quarterback. Oh, man. All that's still to come. Robert Allen Friend Show with Patrick Wheeler and Levi Peckinpah. That's next. Welcome back. Robert Allen Friend Show, final hour, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Levi Peckinpah coming on in, hanging out with me for the final hour. It's been a lot of fun doing Robert's show these last few days. Hey, I've learned, 3 hours, it can go by pretty fast. It really can.
Oh, yeah. Once you're on some great topics, get great guests, get to talk to the great people. I mean, it just goes by.
We had some fantastic guests this whole time. A ton of really good interviews with a lot of guys around the sports world. And that's been extremely, with everything going on right now, extremely relevant. And that's the thing is so I got to ask you to start off first. We saw the Big Ten news. I wasn't surprised one bit to see the Pac-12 follow suit. Were you?
No, I wasn't at all. And now we're just kind of sitting here in the waiting process because the two people that are going to hold their feet down and stand their ground are the obvious with the SEC and the Big 12. And so now we just got to sit here and watch and see what do they do. And these would be the two conferences that would, because they're the biggest out of everybody with what they've got.
See, that's what I said, and I agree with it. But until this weekend when Greg Sankey comes out and says, I think it's high to very high, talking about how worried he was to not having a football season in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't see the need for that comment now. Okay, if anything, I would think let's stand up and say we're still planning on having football, just like they did. Because
Right.
I commended Greg Sankey at the beginning of all this when the response was from the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the ACC, we don't know.
Right.
And then the SEC came out, even if he had no idea what he was talking about, he still said, we're going to have football. Because I've always said it this whole time, look, if anything, the SEC is going to play football. I would still be very, very, very shocked to find out that they don't play some sort of a season. But I didn't see it I didn't see the logic behind him coming out and saying, just don't think, I don't know, it's possible we don't have a season at all. Like this weekend when all that came down, to me it was the perfect opportunity for the SEC and the Big 12, which that's why I give Bowlesby a ton of credit because he hasn't backed down.
Right.
But the SEC and the Big 12 to say, look, we're still going after it.
Yeah, you want that just little bit of optimism in a
Yeah.
time where things just don't look too optimistic. And I'm wondering if maybe that's what's getting to them. We've seen several times, you look on several posts online and you'll just look, and the numbers for the United States compared to a lot of different places, oh my goodness, they're in the 5 digits for how many cases you have added on a daily basis that just continue to grow and grow. And so that those numbers continue to get bigger and bigger, and that just means more of a fan base has the potential of being infected, and that also means just more and more people, if they get packed into a stadium, it just leads to a bigger opportunity of more infections and things to get worse. And I'm wondering if those overwhelming numbers are something that whenever, like a big time person, whenever it comes to a conference, is when they see those numbers, it just kind of makes them sit back in their chair a little bit and just have to rethink things and how they're going to operate.
That's kind of my problem with it, is I think I agree with you that there's a lot of these people that are overwhelmed by the numbers, okay, because the cases are skyrocketing. But they don't look deeper enough, because yes, there has been some deaths that if we had an uptick in it, but regarding all the numbers of cases we're having, we're not seeing this huge influx of people just dying from the coronavirus, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's mainly because a lot of these people,
they're young.
They're college
Yeah.
kids. And that's the thing, is with all these people influxing, it's going to be college kids, and then a lot of these guys are just going to be going back on campus, talking, partying. They're going to be doing their usual college stuff, so that means it's a bigger opportunity to get infections across the nation.
That's the issue that we face, okay? Because when you look and you dig down deep into it, with college football players, most of them that have tested positive, asymptomatic. No hospitalizations, really. These guys that get it wouldn't even know if they weren't being tested, right?
Right.
Do you agree that being on a college campus is actually safer for football players right now than if they were out doing whatever by themselves? Just on my details and my backup to that is because of all the medical professionals and all the services that are available to these guys. Because football players at any school are treated, let's be honest, they're treated better, okay? They are treated like the top dogs, because they are. So with that being the case, wouldn't now even be more heightened? I mean, the medical professionals realize how important it is to have a football season.
Right. I mean, yeah, think about it. In a lot of other cases, if they were just out doing whatever they want to do, that means that you have no idea, and you can't put a thumb on what exactly these guys are going out and being able to do. But also, whenever you think about it, when you come back here at campus, and yes, you're going to have the supervision of a lot of the people in the staff and just being able to try to watch and make sure you're monitoring all these kids, they're still going to have friends that are going to come over. They're still going to be interacting with a lot of people. And there's a chance that some of those people that are going to be coming back, and they're going to finally get a chance to see, after what's been months and months of all of a sudden just getting snapped up from the university, there's still going to be big chances of partying and being able to be themselves and have the quote-unquote college experience.
Yeah.
I mean, so even if and I do think it would be safer here because the monitoring compared to what it'd be like on their own is it's drastically up. And Mike Gundy, Mike Boynton, they both have thumbs on whatever's going on in their program, but they would still have a little bit of access to being themselves, and that could be risky on how things go in the future.
We're not going. Here's the thing: when it comes to football teams and universities, we're going to see during the season too, right? Because I'm still confident we're going to have some form of season. Mm-hmm. With that being the case, there's going to be the occasional team that unfortunately didn't get positive tests now, okay? Mm-hmm. Because they would rather have them right now and get them dealt with.
Right.
During the season, it's going to happen. If there's not going to be, and I've said this a ton of times, but it's true, if there's not going to be this ability to basically lock down your student athletes, you're going to have the occasional team where it's like, wow, we had a little bit of an outbreak, and all of a sudden we can't play this game. Right. So that's the issue I think where we're at now, is if you lower the number of games, like the Big Ten is doing, and the Pac-12 and probably the ACC, if that ends up being the case, then what happens? Because it would have been, let's be honest, a lot better if you had a game that was non-conference, you're playing some no-name, and you can't field a team.
Right.
If it's a forfeit, whatever, you take it. But imagine Ohio State going in against Michigan, and they can't play the game, right? So to me, there's a bigger risk, too, of limiting the number of games. You have that possibility of happening.
Yeah, there is a big chance that when it gets down to the end of the season and say you have some games where you just have teams where there's just so many people that have COVID that you have to forfeit the game, that it completely shifts the plane of college football. Because say it was a big team like a Michigan and an Ohio State, or say like an Alabama, things change drastically throughout the college football world, and it turns everything into a whirlwind. So these officials have to find some kind of middle ground to where you can keep and still monitor all these kids while also being able to give them slightly their freedoms, but they still have to realize that the way that we can keep this program onto the top of the top and be able to keep going is you have to realize the situation we're in and realize you have to keep yourself safe so that way you can keep pushing the university forward.
Yeah, to me, this is an honor system situation, okay, just like it is in some professional sports. With Major League Baseball, these guys are going to go home every single night. Mm-hmm. They get that opportunity. They're not in a bubble. They can go wherever without restriction, okay? Right. So a lot of it is falling on an honor system. It's like, we are not going to stop you from going out there and doing what you want and living your life. But here's the thing, too, okay? I wonder how many people, for instance, when colleges ramp back up and you see I'm not saying this would happen, but you see a Travis Etienne, or you see a Trevor Lawrence, or somebody is out with a large group of people, okay? He's living his life. Couldn't we see the video comes out the next day? Oh, my gosh, this dude is partying.
Right.
He's being, quote-unquote, to some people, irresponsible. That's next, right?
Yeah, you turn a guy into what seems like a peaceful type of just university guy, thumbs up, and you turn him into part Johnny Manziel, and everything goes to, oh no, what do we have on our hands?
The Johnny Manziel curse. Let's call it that.
Oh, yeah, yes.
That could be. See, I think that's why top players have even more of a responsibility for themselves, okay? Not just Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, but Chuba, a guy who wants to head into the NFL after this season and be able to do that with hopefully without a limitation this year in his college year.
Right.
Takes it maybe more serious than everyone else and says, you know what, I got to play a full season. I got to make sure. And then to me, been a college kid before, you are one.
Yes.
It's hard, man. I mean, the temptation is there. You got to be, you're like, man, it's Saturday night. Oh my gosh, that girl I've been talking to, she's going to the bar. But also at the same time, oh man, my future could reside on whether I decide to go out or not.
Oh, yeah. Temptation and peer pressure is everywhere. I mean, even whenever you're just doing your basic things, that temptation is always literally just right around the corner. And for these college kids and for these athletes, if they take that, they're easily risking several weeks in the college football season. And for a guy like Chuba Hubbard, for a guy like Tylan Wallace, and for all these other guys on this team, it's risking NFL draft stock because a lot of these guys are going to go to Oklahoma State. They're going to play here, have a great time, and may not ever touch the NFL. But there's going to be a really good portion of these guys that are on this team that will be going to the NFL. And say if something hits where they end up going out partying and they just drop their stock, that might also drop some like respect level within the organization between the coaches and the players, and then you end up losing some playing time. There's so many situations where if this goes wrong and say students and athletes get affected, it can go very wrong very fast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what they're going to have to balance out with the opportunity to play this season. And kind of here's what I said too, though. Okay, because when I had the issue with the Big Ten being so quick to decide, I guess, here with what they're doing, I brought up the idea of when you actually look at some of the numbers, okay, and they cite travel as one of the main issues, with the risk of less infection spread if it's there at different places. But what I don't understand, okay, if you're in Ohio State, for instance, Rutgers can come in 500 plus miles away. Okay, mm-hmm. But you can't have Bowling Green come in 200 plus miles away.
Right.
I mean, so there's a lot of questions still of how quick this decision was made,
or how you can't have Oregon State come here, but then again, someone or West Virginia can make a trip.
Right. There's a lot of things where that's where I bring up the idea of, if anything, it should have been selectively canceling or substituting out non-conference games.
Right.
Okay. You find an opponent that might be willing to play that's closer. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because we're seeing more of these smaller conferences drop to by the day.
Right.
The Patriot League says today we're done. Mm-hmm. We're not having fall sports at all. How many more FBS conferences ultimately do that? So with that being the idea and the contingency plans are in place, shouldn't one of them be, let's think logically and geographically here. Mm-hmm. What is a team that we can go and grab that's a bus ride away? Because they're out there, right?
Right, yeah. That would make things a lot easier instead of trying to think of things by conference, because, again, they're dropping like flies, and you hate to see that because that, again, leaves less opponents for a lot of these schools to just be able to fill in and make things easier. But it'd be easier just to go and try to fill in things geographically and just be able to go pick a little small school here. They'll be able to get a little bit of money. We'll be able to get that easy win, that nice game to where you can get a little bit of viewership, get a little bit of momentum. But with all of everything going on right now, you're trying to figure out how to fill those in while dealing with the reactions, and to some people might also think overreactions of some conferences, and it's very frustrating on the side of like the upper management of the Big 12 and the SEC trying to figure out where you're going to fill in those holes.
Yeah, because honestly, and I hate this for them, but I think most commissioners are in a spot where it's like we can't really make a right decision here, okay? Mm-hmm. Because if the Big Ten didn't do what they did, or if the Big 12 and if Greg Sankey and the SEC goes ahead with a normal schedule, don't tell me they won't get ridiculed and ripped for it, okay? Because they will. People will come out and say they don't care about the health of their students or whatever. They just won't care about football. But if they did go ahead and cancel it, then that they don't want to do that if they're being honest. There's not a win-win for them at all here. But I have this is interesting. Missouri State, kind of where I'm from, Springfield area in Missouri, and Oklahoma play this year in football. They've been in talks now to possibly push this game up a little bit. Does that make sense to you now? Because what I said was originally, why not try to push some games up? At that time, what it would have meant was we would need to have kids on campus earlier if possible to get the testing and all that done, because like Aaron said, we saw what happened at Clemson and K-State and all that during this time. Right. So with that being the case, though, forget that for a minute. But does this make sense now to try to move up a game like Missouri State at Oklahoma to get that money game if you're the Bears?
It does make sense, because if you try to move things up, it could possibly get there before there's more and more sanctions that might potentially happen as we get closer and closer. So being able to move it up, you might be able to secure yourself that money in case, again, say we get closer and closer to the season and maybe, that game does get moved up and maybe some others don't, and it's just maybe that's the premier game that happens. And of course you're saying that is the premier game. But say something happens and after that you're having to deal with so much other stuff to where you might have to push things more and more back, and it could get frustrating for a lot of other universities trying to get games in. So pushing yourself forward and trying to also, because I assume with this that means Missouri State is going to be on the top of health, trying to keep track of everything. Same with Oklahoma. I think the majority of universities are trying to do that, but that means you're trying to keep things in tip-top shape, trying to keep your players in tip-top shape. and trying to make things look and feel the best for these players as we're trying to get closer and closer to a normal football season.
That's why teams like Missouri State, I mean, they are on their knees begging and praying that the Big 12 doesn't pull a Big 10 or a Pac-12 and get rid of these money games,
right.
Okay? Because there are, just like Aaron said, there are maybe some of these schools in the Big 10 that are like, you know what, we're actually going to saving some money.
Oh, yeah, so many of these universities rely on this money.
Yeah. And
you don't think about it because, of course, we're the big guys, and we're just thinking about trying to get to the college playoffs and just trying to make that next step. Well, some of these games, these smaller games, keep universities and these athletic programs in check. It actually gives them money, and it's their support system. Without that, it really hurts a lot of these students and a lot of these people with jobs. And these money games for these universities are so pivotal that it's just important to them. And so without these games, it really leaves a lot of places just kind of strained for money, potentially strained and without sports.
It's a tough time. I think that's what Aaron also made pretty clear was, look, a lot of guys and commissioners in these Power Fives, they're like you and I. Mm-hmm. They are going off of what they see. Now, whether they agree with all of us, differs, of course, but they're also, this is different. This is something they've never had to deal with. So does that, to me, it still doesn't really excuse the idea of let's cancel some games now.
Right.
I that's why I really do believe that Bob Bowlesby made a strong statement when he said, look, we're just not ready to do that yet.
Right. I mean, think about it. Not only in their situation, but in everybody's situation, we're trying to make this up on the fly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No one knows truly when are we going to get back to normal. How is the next day going to go? Are we going to go back to a lockdown, which I hope that doesn't happen? What does tomorrow bring in? Truly, no one knows. So we're all just trying to make everything up on the fly and trying to get the best results possible for each other.
Let's go to the phone lines. You're on the afternoon, or not on the afternoon. I knew I was going to say that again. You're on the Robert Allen and Friends show with Levi Peckinpah, Patrick Wheeler. Go ahead.
Yeah. Listen, guys, how y'all are doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Great.
Doing good. Listen, I'm going to throw a scenario at you, and I'll listen to it off the air and let you guys maybe discuss a little bit. Okay, let's say the Big 12 and the SEC stick by their guns, and they get in, their 12 games. Okay, they get in their 12 games. Say in Alabama goes undefeated, Georgia goes undefeated, and then they meet each other in the conference championship. And then say OSU goes undefeated, except maybe they lose a close one to Oklahoma. And then they get in the Big 12 championship game, and they beat in Oklahoma. Okay. So then you got Ohio State, which the Big Ten says they're going to play 10 conference games, and then they have a conference championship. So then say Ohio State goes at 11-0, but you got two Big 12 teams that are 12-1, and then you got an SEC team that's 12-1 and one that's 13-0. Do those four teams make it into the BCS championship game? I mean the playoffs in front of a 11-0 Ohio State. Yeah, I'll listen to you guys kind of discuss that.
All right, thanks for the phone call.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, see, here's the thing. They would have to weigh, and then look, the college football playoff, we all have our issues every single year with that committee, okay? There's sometimes teams where we're like, oh, okay, come on, really? But also we've had the problem with not enough teams get the chance in. That's my issue. But with this situation, here's the thing. They would have to sit down and say, look, this Big Ten team over here went straight through the conference and no losses.
Right.
That's a big deal. This Big 12 team over here played more games and only came away with one loss. That's still a pretty big deal. So you have to weigh that out. If I were sitting there on the committee, I would really consider how many tough teams at that time are sitting in the Big Ten. Okay, if Ohio State goes through their schedule, and some of those teams in the Big Ten are kind of like mid-tier, which they can be. I look at what I think is going to be a fairly competitive Big 12, and I say Oklahoma State, one loss. Let's say, like he said, it was to Oklahoma, and maybe it was a really competitive game. I think I give the edge to the Big 12 team there because they had to go through a longer season. They had to prepare more. They had to game plan more. And on top of that, if they came away with this unprecedented type of season with just one loss throughout that entire conference compared to an undefeated, I know there would be people that would be like, oh my gosh, undefeated Big Ten team, what are you talking about? I'd probably still go with the Big 12 team.
Yeah, I think I would as well, because the Big Ten teams and Big 12 conference, Big Ten conference in general, sometimes the Big Ten is a little bit wishy-washy when it comes to teams. Sometimes it's truly front-loaded, and then when you look at the back half, you're just sitting there and it's like, man, 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 looks great, but after that, you're just sitting there and it's not a lot of competition. But then you look at the Big 12. The Big 12 every single year is about 9 or 8 teams that are willing to just beat each other down to the ground, and then what is literally left of the rubble is brought to the playoffs and then is crushed. But whenever you look at that and you want to compare, say, again, it's an Oklahoma State team and an OU team, both of them are sitting at 1 loss, compared to an Ohio State team that are, again, undefeated, but their schedule isn't as heavy as, again, in Oklahoma and OU. I would have to go with both of the Big 12 teams, because their schedule would just seem bigger and better because, again, more games and tougher opponents.
It would depend on, I think, a lot what the strength of that schedule played out to, okay? Mm-hmm. Because, for instance, Oklahoma or Ohio State, when you look at their schedule, Iowa, Michigan State, Penn State. I mean, those are 3 pretty solid. Definitely Penn State, Michigan State. Right. Michigan down the road. Okay, those 3 games, and you mix in, obviously, Nebraska, Maryland, Indiana, all those. You're like, okay. So if that conference ends up being, let's say, the Big Ten, it's all going to be all conference. Mm-hmm. If it's just a beat up, nobody besides Ohio State is taking the reins, then maybe you consider it a little differently. Mm-hmm. So it's going to depend on if the Big 12 plays a full schedule, and you've got some teams that just don't live up to the expectations, and they come in and Oklahoma State just stomps these teams with 500 or lower records by chance. Then maybe you switch it up. But I think that's going to be one of the tougher positions for the College Football Playoff Committee, okay? Ever.
Oh, yeah.
Ever.
Oh, yeah, because we're always, again, everybody each year is ragging on that College Football Committee, and sometimes for good reasons. But this is going to be the hardest year to try to figure out what in the world are you going to do to get the best teams in the playoffs, so that way you can get the best games and best ratings. And that's going to be having to be picking a lot of hairs, just weaving through everything and trying to figure out what can we do to get the best games possible. How are we going to judge things? And I'm glad I don't have to go through that criteria.
It's another one of those situations where we're happy we are doing what we're doing and not sitting on the College Football Playoff Committee.
Sir.
When we come back, the NBA bubble, not when, or let's switch that around. Not if, but when will it be punctured, and how exactly? Well, we might have a solid idea based on stuff we've learned over the weekend. We'll talk about that next on the Robert Allen and Friends Show with Patrick Wheeler and Levi Peckinpah. Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Levi Peckinpah holding it down for Robert one more day here on Monday. I love this topic, okay? I love this topic because it's one of those where it's like in the back of people's minds, and a lot of times they don't say it, even on a national scale. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a lot of talk shows that like to steer away from things and don't like to be like, you know what, that's life.
Yeah.
But finally, the other day, I say this right now, I don't watch a lot of First Take. Okay, I don't really sit on ESPN and watch anything a lot. I see a lot of clips on social media from it.
The only time I ever watched it is the Stephen A. Smith burner account.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's hilarious.
It's great.
That's what I see a lot too. And Stephen A. Smith is obviously a pretty funny guy. Okay, mm-hmm. He's good at what he does. It's hilarious. And this was no different. He sits there on the panel, and he's tiptoeing around, but he's like, hey, what are NBA players going to do about the whole female situation? Okay, is a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. Because we know how NBA players are during the year. We've seen the videos on social media of where they hang out during the time they're not playing. Not everybody, but a lot. So in this situation, Stephen A. Smith floated the idea, look, there's going to be some females that get into this bubble. Okay, we remember after the 5 weeks, like guests is what they're called. Guests can start coming into the bubble, which, again, furthers the point of why the bubble right now. Not only that, but like we talked about, with the Disney World employees getting to come in and out. Okay, so it's technically already being punctured.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So when this and when we get on this topic, because we see further evidence possibly of it now on social media, right? This girl on social media tweets, this is her tweet, I already got invited to the bubble. Yeah, the season definitely ending early. Cry face, cry face, cry face. Next week was people calling me a snitch like it's not known that they can have visitors in like 5 weeks. Well, technically, I didn't know either until I got the invite. So if this is true, first of all, who invited?
Who invited? The speculation.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about it off air, and if I had to say somebody, I would just think it would be like Devin Booker. I just have the gut feeling that it would be someone like a Devin Booker, or it's someone that maybe this is one of their like first experiences of like, big success. So maybe they just, we have a chance of making the playoffs, and so now we're going to do this. And maybe somebody's just like, oh, yeah, that'd be a great opportunity. But with the female situation, everybody's just sitting here, and it's like, I don't know if we can truly address that, because that feels like a situation that is weird to address, but that is going to be happening in this bubble. And no one wants to say, but it's something that's going to happen. And so you got to think about, why is this happening in the first place? Why is this bubble happening if no matter what, people are still going to be able to get in and interact with these players?
That's what I'm saying. It makes more sense to do the whole MLB thing now. I mean, just do it at your home sites and put the honor system out there. Because when this does inevitably happen, is the NBA going to have to be like, oh my gosh, we have 3 or 4 positive cases? Regardless of the player's name, the bubble has essentially been punctured, and we're going to have to shut down the season.
Right? I
mean, is that going to be the response?
It might have to be, because say if the cases that become positive, say if they're even bigger names, even bigger than Russell Westbrook that just popped up that he's positive. What if, say, somehow LeBron James becomes positive? The world will go upside down even more than it already is. But say again, like, if a LeBron James, James Harden, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kawhi Leonard, if one of those big names gets it, everybody's going to freak out more than they already do. So at that point, you just go, then why did we do this in the first place?
Exactly.
Because think about it. This could be so much easier by having it like in about 4 or 5 different sites. Think about it. Having it in about LA, New York, Florida, maybe in the Texas area, maybe Houston, maybe Dallas. Because think about it. A lot of these people, yes, they play for these teams. They play for Phoenix, Sacramento, Minnesota. But a lot of these people have places usually on coast. I mean, you have a lot of people where they have California houses, New York houses, some down on the South Beach. So why not just have it in those central areas and say, all right, we're going to have the honor system. We expect you to be, the $1 million athletes that we pay you to be. We expect you to have some level of competence in you to not do anything completely dumb that could jeopardize the season.
And then I think, too, they would be like, you know what? Let's have this happen. But at the same time, if it does happen that you test positive because of these reasons, like we laid it out there, like you just said, that we're just going to not be able to have the season. I mean, that's the risk. If you guys really want to play, I know this sucks, but we're asking for a few months of your time here, okay? To even shorter than that, to just do your best to not. And right, people think back, they're like, it's just like the college football situation we talked about. Players are going to be on the same thing. So you can only go so far with trying to tell these people something, by the way, that they're extremely used to, okay? NBA players any season, at any given time, can go wherever they want, do whatever they want with whoever they want, right? And we know that it happens. So with that being the case, I don't know how easy it is to tell to some of these guys, it's like breathing, to tell them, look, you got to be by yourself.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, too, is I've even seen some sports media people come out and say, look, because we've seen a lot, why are NBA players complaining as much as they are right now about this whole bubble situation? Like, yeah, it's stupid. It doesn't make any sense, but quit acting like you're mistreated during all this. Like,
you're staying at Disneyland.
Yeah, you're staying at Disneyland. You guys are taken care of. Okay, so stop complaining.
Now that I think about it, it might be James Harden. That's the big
that's why it came to mind too, because we see all the videos of him hanging out at the strip clubs, and it's I mean, right?
Or it could be Kawhi Leonard, because there were videos of him popping up that he was also doing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it could be anybody, really.
It truly could. I just hope it's nobody that big, but. With all this popping up, you would just think you would have some way to at least restrain yourself and be sensible in this type of moment. And I say that, but you also got to think about the league is a bunch of young 20-year-olds. It's a lot of.
It's getting younger and younger.
It's getting younger and younger. And I mean, Vince Carter just retired. One of the last guys in the 90s classes retired. I mean, just saying that just makes me just like shiver a little bit. But when you think about it, it's a lot of these guys who, again, don't know their way in the world truly as much as some of these other guys do. You don't have a lot of that veteran leadership in the league anymore. So it's, again, trying to figure out your own way in the world. And some of it probably isn't the best for the conduct that the NBA wants at this time.
Look, it would be one thing if you weren't being constantly tested, okay? Constantly. These guys, if they have it, they're going to find out. If it were a even once a week thing, maybe you could try to get away with something here and there. Might not still work, but you could try. But with the constant testing that's going to happen for these guys, that too, if I were a player and if I were on a team that really had a shot, okay, because we can look down the list of teams that are going to be there and know which ones actually have a shot. We just can with the NBA, probably more than any other sport. If I'm sitting there on the Lakers or the Bucks or the Clippers or whatever, I'm thinking, okay, if ever were a time to show some self-restraint, it is right now, buddy.
Oh, yeah, it is right now. And this is where, if I was an organization, I don't know if this is legally possible, but I would hope it would be. If things were to come out that you were doing that, I would throw down some fines, man. Because at this point, with a lot of these guys, some of these guys, of course, there's rookies, they're still young guys, but a lot of these guys, they do have time in the league, and they know this is not the time to be doing anything like this. This is the time where you should be, again, you mess around in the parks. I mean, you've seen videos of a lot of these guys fishing, doing fun things, and you should be able to restrain yourselves and be professional basketball players, like you're being paid to be.
I would hope so. I would. There's this human part of you. I don't know. You know, where does the line get drawn? Let's go to the phone line. You're on the Robert Allen and Friends show. You got Patrick Wheeler and Levi Peckinpah with you. Go ahead.
Hey guys, I just wanted to say real quick, if our military guys can have some restraint on the battlefield, you guys could too.
I mean, I would want to say yes because of what they're, what could possibly lie ahead. But at the same time, when we're talking NBA players, we all know. I mean, we all know, right? If we had to label a group of athletes that this is what they are used to, it's NBA players.
Yes.
Right, for sure. All right, guys,
thanks. That's a good. It's a decent comparison. I mean, think of guys in the military. It's kind of the same way, right? Well, I mean, there's differences, but it's also, we can't do this, can't do that for different reasons. Now, their reasons are infinitely more important. Okay, so and I would also think that the average military person, man or woman, would probably have more restraint. Like they're taught that's part of being in the military.
Right, a little bit more discipline.
Yeah, a little bit, exactly, more discipline. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, but you would just think, again, like we were talking about, these guys, again, are young guys, and so they're still trying to figure things out. But again, you're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to go out there and play basketball. You would think when you're making that much really good money that you would be able to have at least just some restraint in the quarantine bubble period.
So, go back to the phone lines. You're on the Robert Allen Friends show. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Hey, how about restraint as an 18-year-old guy away from home for the first time times 100?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I've...
And then you times, you're 10 teams in your league. That's a lot of restraint there.
No, and to think that we're not asking for a lot as fans is wrong, because we are. We're asking for a lot from these young dudes.
I just wonder how much is going to be enough where they shut it down.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why we've talked about the problem with the bubble exists, because there might be a few, and even if there were a few cases like there were in Major League Soccer, for instance, in the bubble, there were a few cases, even for one team, you might be like, okay, a team's got to go or whatever. But if it's like this wide out, just a giant outbreak, and there's people everywhere that aren't supposed to be in there, and there's guys that are getting it all over the place, then that's when, especially the NBA, who's been pretty forthcoming about all this, will say, sorry, we're done.
Yep.
Right. Well, I'm thinking that yesterday Florida had the highest rate of positive cases for one day, and it was like 15,000. That's and to try to keep them in the bubble and then, keep them focused on them. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's a waiting game. I mean, I don't know.
That's a good point. Basically, this time it is kind of a waiting game.
Yeah, having all this go down in Florida was not the best decision by the NBA. Nah. So trying to navigate all this is just very weird and difficult. But then again, like we were saying earlier, trying to navigate this for anybody is difficult. So the NBA is trying their best to figure it out, but it just seems like there's too many like little loopholes in the contract to try to figure out what they can still do and be themselves while also being able to play these NBA games.
Yeah, that's true. All right, guys, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look, the other thing is, too, we've all been, at least you and I, and callers here, too, we've all been 18-year-old males, okay? And it's just, we get it. So that's why I think it's also from that perspective, it's like, and look, think about it, too, here, with the access that NBA players have also. They're stars. Okay, we all know what the star female ratio is. It's just, and so that's why I think you have to throw that out there too. I want to say this about Florida, okay, because he brought up the daily cases. The daily cases were nuts. Okay, that's a lot of daily cases. We do also have to remember, because this takes a lot of, you have to look through the data to understand this. Okay, the positive case percentage 2-week low in Florida. That's important. All-time high daily testing there. They're testing a ton of people in Florida alone, and we saw a high in negative cases also. Okay. So, yeah, it's spreading amongst young people, so we need to make sure that is what we put out there. But I also understand at this time with Florida, okay, this is, and that's why, too, if the bubble is not going to actually be a bubble, with all this going on there, what can we really expect? It's like you said, it's like a waiting game of when it's going to be canceled. I mean, I hate to say it, but come on.
Yeah, you're waiting for the ticking time bomb. You know what's going to happen. We're all sitting here. We know what's going to happen. We know the results, but it's just like, okay, we got to wait for the tripwire to go, and then the charade will be gone, and we will know what's going to happen.
Yeah, let's hope that these games before the 5 weeks are at least entertaining.
Yeah.
When we come back, Baltimore Ravens running back Mark Ingram said what about Patrick Mahomes? We'll talk about that next round out the Robert Allen and Friends Show.
You got a question or comment? Shoot Robert a text at 405-385-4221. It's the Triple Play text line brought to you by the Cimarron Casino on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Get a great deal on the durable Kubota L-Series tractor, built upon a solid foundation of cast iron and steel. The Kubota L-Series tractor is the #1 selling compact tractor in the U.S. for over 10 years. Get an L-Series tractor for 0 down, 0 APR for 60 months, plus save up to $1,600 now through July 31st. See the folks at Payne County Implement or go to KubotaUSA.com for full disclaimer. See the full line of Kubota equipment at Payne County Implement, Highway 177 south of Stillwater. Do you or someone you love manage asthma, emphysema, COPD, and other respiratory conditions? If so, you know how important it is to keep track of oxygen levels. Right now, Cimarron Medical Services is offering the Roscoe Fingertip Pulse Oximeters, 10% off all month long. Give yourself peace of mind with a Roscoe Fingertip Pulse Oximeter from Cimarron Medical Services, another quality service of SMC, west of the Stillwater Medical Plaza on 12th Street.
Get ready to have some fun at Iowa Casino. Play on over 200 of the newest slots and win big on exciting weekly promotions. Indulge in your favorite comfort foods or succulent steaks that are cooked to perfection at our Iowa Steakhouse. Sip your favorite cocktail and enjoy live events too. We can't wait to see you. For more information, visit iowacasino.com. Only at Iowa Casino, Route 66 west of Chandler. Owned and operated by the Iowa Tribe of Oklahoma.
When life-threatening severe weather is heading towards Stillwater, the Triple Play Sports Radio Network has you covered with the Central Electric Cooperative Severe Weather Watch. Stay alert, stay informed, stay safe with the Central Electric Cooperative Severe Weather Watch on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Stillwater City Manager Norman McNichol. If you're managing a Stillwater business, the city is working to provide you some free face coverings. Stop by Visit Stillwater or the Chamber of Commerce to learn more. Mask up, Stillwater. Show you care.
At Tiger Drug, we take pride in providing fast, friendly, personal service. Craig, Carla, Troy, and I are all pharmacists who put your healthcare needs first. And while you're there getting your medicine, take a look at our selection of gift merchandise. Whether it's toys, candy, cards, or candles, we have the right gift for your special occasion. Remember Tiger Drug, where the customer comes first. I'm Brandy Moore.
Initiating the Robert Allen and Friends show.
If you set Chuba down right now and you asked him, does he regret it? He would say no. But if you asked him, did you expect to this degree, did you expect the attention? And I don't think he did. He would be the first one to tell you, yeah, I didn't want that. But that's what comes with it in today's society, and that's what comes with it, especially in this recent climate.
The Robert Allen and Friends Show, Monday through Friday from 10 to 1 at your home for sports talk with an orange flavor. Triple Play Sports Radio.
Welcome back. Robert Allen and Friends Show, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Levi Peckinpah having some fun talking to you all on Monday. My last cover for Robert. He's coming back. And, again, speaking of that, I need to mention where he will. I know he will be there at least once this week. The crazy days that are going to be taking place at the End Zone.
I say I can run out, look at the calendar.
That's right. No, yeah, it starts today. So he's going to be there this week. Monday through Thursday, store-wide there, 50% off. Hours from 9 to 8. Friday through Sunday, these are the big weekend deals right here. Sidewalk sale, 70% off everything there at the End Zone. I mean, you can get, and they said a ton of new Nike stuff coming in, all that. You can basically get whatever you could think of in the gear world, and guess what? For a lot cheaper than you'd find anywhere else.
So many great prices.
Oh, yeah. That's big time. 70% off? Wow. Okay. That's about as good as you can ask for right now.
Oh, yep.
Go for it. Check it out. They are open right now. It's starting today through the 18th. So get it done. Get out there and support. All right. This is... I heard this over the weekend. And, I thought to myself, Mark Ingram, even throughout his college career, okay, he's said some dumb things. Okay. He's been that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Said some dumb things. I've liked watching him play always. I mean, he's been a pretty good running back most of his career, bounced around a little bit, but has found success in a lot of spots.
Yep.
And, right, I mean...
Yep, he was good for the Saints, good for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, he was pretty solid for the Saints, and I think, what was it, they had that year last year, or the year before, I guess, when it was him and Kamara.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, this is actually a pretty solid 1-2 punch. Well, then he became part of that big deal in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. He comes out this weekend on CBS. They ask him on CBS Sports. They say, "Hey Lamar," or they say, "Hey Mark, what is your quarterback Lamar Jackson worth compared to Patrick Mahomes?" We all know the deal that he just signed, and Mark Ingram, being Mark Ingram, I think literally if you ask him any question about Lamar Jackson, he'd just hype him up. Which, to an extent, that's fine, but at the same time, it's like, let's be realistic. He says that Lamar Jackson deserves the same contract that Patrick Mahomes got. And my immediate response was, I pulled the Stephen A. Smith, and I said, "Stay off the weed. What are you smoking?" And that was my issue here.
Mm-hmm.
Lamar Jackson, you're telling me he deserves 10 years, $500 million, and he hasn't even won a playoff game yet. Am I missing something here, or is Mark Ingram just going off the rails a little bit?
I think when Mark Ingram's talking about that, I think he's just thinking about the clear potential that Lamar Jackson has.
But even then,
then, he has won an MVP, and I will admit Lamar Jackson is a great football player. He's wonderful.
I won't deny that.
But again, he's only in his second year. This was his second year of football. He hasn't won a playoff game yet. He's still got a lot of things that he needs to accomplish to get that type of money. He's going to get paid. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no doubt.
The man's going to get more money than I'll see in about 20 lifetimes.
Yeah.
When he gets that next contract, we're all going to be sitting here like, dang, that's a lot of money. And then every quarterback in the league is going to rejoice, just like everybody did when Patrick Mahomes got that contract, because there's the potential now I might be able to get that money. And I know that's what Lamar Jackson has got to be looking at.
Oh, yeah.
Because think about it. That was a baseball contract.
Yeah.
That's a lifetime thing where, say, if things go wrong and we haven't end up, we'll release you, we're going to pay you for the next 30 years and you're never going to have to worry about anything.
Guess who was just as happy as Patrick Mahomes when that contract was signed? Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow with the potential.
And your boy Dak Prescott also.
Dak with no reason behind it.
Yes.
And coming into the league, Trevor Lawrence, these guys, Justin Fields, these guys that are coming into the league all of a sudden are like, look what is possible now, okay? Because the market has been reset. So they were all just as thrilled, especially Lamar Jackson, who probably out of all those quarterbacks I named has the best potential to signing, not, I wouldn't even say similar, but a big contract.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the thing. No playoff wins. And not only that, but in the playoffs so far, he's like a different guy. It's like it's not even good, Lamar Jackson. He just like folds. And I don't know how much of that is taking the beating that he does as a running quarterback throughout the season, because that's what I factor into this too. A running quarterback is not feasible for 10 more years in the NFL. Now, the guy is crazy athletic. He will make people miss, but he does take a lot of hard hits too.
Right.
If he doesn't establish himself as a pocket passer, okay, which I have come out and said still to this point, I don't buy him as a pure pocket passer.
Oh, yeah.
Then at this point, if he doesn't start doing that starting this year a little bit more, they may award him. They're going to award him a big contract, but money well spent? I don't know. What was the reaction when Patrick Mahomes signed the contract? Everybody was like, deserved it. I can see why. I'd do it too. Would that really be the case for Lamar? What it would be is you'd have the people on ESPN and everywhere else that, you know, lick his boots on everything that would say, yeah, he deserves it. Because they just back it up ever since the whole comment was made about, hey, Lamar, would you want to be a wide receiver or whatever? People were just like, oh my gosh, how could you say that to Lamar Jackson? It was a legitimate question. Since then, it's been, we gotta defend Lamar with everything. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great football player, but I don't buy him as a pure pocket passer, which guess what? In this league, in 2020, you got to be.
You got to be able to be a pocket passer. I don't think he's like terrible at it. He's probably around below average.
He's not terrible, but there's a lot of times where there's throws that you got to make.
There are some throws when you look at it, you're just sitting here it's like, oh, goodness, why did you do that? But think about it. Whenever he came in here as his first year, he got the starting job halfway through the season. He didn't even get a full season under his boots. This was his true full first season as a starting QB, and he was able to get an MVP. That just shows you the potential. This dude, with the athleticism that Lamar Jackson has, I mean, he threw 36 touchdowns with 6 interceptions. That's pretty good for a quarterback when it's his true first year of starting.
Yeah, if he gets to the point to where he can continue at least some of what he's doing on the ground and become a guy that can also not only just pass in the pocket but be comfortable passing in the pocket, then you've got a real dangerous mix.
Yeah, and he was on the boundary of 4,000. He still had a fair ways to go because it was 3,127 yards, but that's still on the boundary of being a 4,000-yard quarterback. I mean, Lamar Jackson, he has all the potential in the world. He's probably one of the, if not the most athletic guys in the NFL. He's got bucket loads of potential. Is he, though, going to be able to do, again, like what Patrick Mahomes has done? After he got the contract, you know what Patrick Mahomes did? Back in the gym. He's ready to keep it going. Can he keep the motor burning, even though he's going to take a lot more hits than Patrick Mahomes? Can he still get up day by day and say, it doesn't matter if I take these hits, I'm still going to go out there and try to prove that I am one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL?
And I think he has proven that he's one of the harder workers. We've seen that. He doesn't really listen to the outside criticism and all that that he does receive. But also at the same time, I'm not thinking about this the way I'm saying it as a Lamar hater. I'm thinking about it as a realist when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL.
Right.
You cannot run. We've seen it, okay? You can do it for the first few years and get success. What is Cam Newton having to do?
I was going to say, Cam Newton is now having to research his career.
Because of the injuries he's taken while running the football.
Oh, yeah.
Look at RG3. He's found himself a team, but he can't stay as a starter. Yeah. Look at all the guys in the past. Tim Tebow. Look at all the guys that ran the football.
Eventually, what happened to Mike Vick?
Exactly. I mean, it's just not – it used to be – really easy to do, okay, if you were an athletic quarterback on your feet. But that's the thing with Lamar Jackson. You give it these first few years, okay? He's making dudes miss, and he's making dudes look silly, and it's different, and it looks like prime Cam Newton even in a lot of times. But it can only last for so long. That's why if you don't see the improvement in him being a pocket passer or a guy that can consistently go down the field or get it done on 3rd and long, teams might say, okay, we'll give him a contract. But why in the world would we sign him past 3 or 4 years? We've seen it too many times of what happens with these quarterbacks. This is why this year I think he has a ton to prove that he can sit in there and get it done through the air.
Oh, yeah, he's got a lot to prove, but again, we've talked about how athletic this dude is. He has all the potential in the world to be able to make that transition, become a great pocket passer.
For sure.
I mean, the one guy that it reminds me of how you were able to transition from being really great at this one thing, I mean, to just having a great overall game, and of course, this guy is shorter. I love to think about Russell Wilson.
Sure.
What he's been able to do in the league has been incredible, and he's literally right behind Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and I will go down as probably the most underrated quarterback in the NFL.
I think it's fair. I don't think he gets enough discussion year in and year out, and a guy that has found a way to move around outside of the pocket, but is probably, in my opinion, the best deep ball thrower in the league.
Yeah, and if I'm Lamar Jackson, I'm trying to take notes from a guy like Russell Wilson. I'm trying to take notes from a lot of these guys who are having to make that transition or have made that transition. I'm trying to take as much notes and as much knowledge up as a 23-year-old in the NFL, because he's still got a lot of game left to play, and he's got a lot of athleticism, so he can easily, if he puts his mind to it and puts the metaphorical money where his mouth is, this dude could change the league.
Yeah, no, he could. And I think also what you're seeing is, for instance, with Mahomes, what he's done in his short time in the NFL, also had a guy who they thought, a lot of people said, hey, who's going to be his kryptonite? Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Well, that hasn't been the case. The Chiefs have taken care of him every time they played him. If this year Lamar Jackson can prove, I can throw the football a lot. I can go down the field a lot more. And if he actually looks comfortable doing it and the Ravens find success doing it, then all of a sudden, as teams and the Ravens, hopefully if they want to keep him around, which I'm sure they do, the eyebrows raised and they're like, this guy actually might be able to sustain a long career. Because guess what? Haven't said it, but it's true. Everybody knows that signing a guy to 10 years is risky, even if it's Patrick Mahomes. We know that. So I'll say this with confidence. I never see him and Lamar Jackson getting a 10-plus deal, year deal. I see 4 to 5 at the most. Now, I do see a lot of money, though, with that attached.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of money. And I think everybody's just sitting back in their seats. We're waiting to press the trigger on the Lamar Jackson is a really great quarterback thing. We're just waiting for the one or two little switches in Lamar Jackson's arsenal to just kick in. And then with the surrounding crew that's going on in Baltimore, that team is going to be nasty. We're just waiting on Lamar Jackson to finally hit his stride.
Completely agree. That's Levi Peckinpah. Thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it as always.
Man, always love it.
A big shout out to Aaron Torres coming on the show last minute as well. He was fantastic. I've been really enjoying it. Again, this is Patrick Wheeler covering for Robert Allen. Robert will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. I've been covering him for the last few days. It's been great. You can hear me back on the afternoon sports drive starting tomorrow. Jason Elmquist will be on today. Do you have plans to be on with him at any point?
I don't.
Okay, I didn't know if you were going to be on or not. So make sure to check that out at 3 o'clock. Coming up next, TV 31 at 1. I'll be back here tomorrow at 3 for the afternoon sports drive. This has been Patrick Wheeler, Levi Peckinpah with the Robert Allen and Friends Show on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. See you then.